And greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I'm your host, Salvador Cordova. We're going to have a variety show tonight, and that means I just talk about some rather disconnected topics. It's not very well planned exactly how the show is going to go. It's been my experience that shows like this are the easiest to make. The hardest shows to make are the ones that are only 12 minutes long. And those shows usually have the most viewers. So these long shows just go on, and it's just because it's easier for me to make them. And plus, the time just spent in fellowship with everyone has been a great blessing to me. And so that's kind of the fun of having just a long show. It's not just the content; it's just the getting to be with everybody and seeing them in the side chat and interacting. I'm expecting, hopefully, at some point, Nicholas will be joining us toward the end of the show to talk about the topics that are on regarding Marx and Gramsci at the end of our docket. So, with all that's happening right now at McLean Bible, I've been looking at what's happening at other churches. So, for many of those who've been joining the channel lately, it's been a lot of it's been driven by the news regarding McLean Bible. The traffic on this website has exploded in the last 2 weeks. So normally this channel covers creationism, and this channel is home to YouTube's #1 YouTube creationist, namely me. And we've covered a lot of molecular biophysics and biology to criticize abiogenesis theory, and also abiogenesis theory and evolution theory, and to reassure us that there is a creator. We've also talked about archaeology. So I've generally stayed within those narrow topics for most of the life of this channel so far, but I'm finding it is helpful to explore other topics that are directly or indirectly related to apologetics and understanding the Christian faith. And so some of this church drama is a great opportunity to learn more about the Bible for even myself, and to explore current topics and trying to understand how we can see evidences of the Christian faith in all of this. What I mean is, as we begin to see how the Bible describes human nature, and then how this plays out when the assumptions about human nature are used to make economic theories, and if those assumptions are false, it really plays out on large scale. And I know some people, as they've studied the question of, like, say, communism, they actually return to the Christian faith because they began to see that these evil philosophies were not grounded in Christianity, and that the way it played out so badly in terms of the loss of life and the cruelty and the tyranny pointed to the Christian faith as being right after all. So these ideas that were adopted by so many intellectuals and in academia, as it's failed, people that were willing to see things clearly began to see that these were just ideas of mere men, and that what God has been trying to teach, as far as where we find our values, our morality, our purpose, what he's been trying to teach was staring us in the face, and that's where the true solutions lie. So this has also been a learning experience for me the last couple of weeks, understanding the mechanics of how churches are organized, or shall we say also disorganized. And I've also had a chance to see that there are some disturbing things happening in the church that actually prevent us from studying facts. studying evidence and reasons for the Christian faith, the very thing that might build people's faith is sometimes dismissed by church leadership. And I think a part of that is just because they don't understand how to use facts to argue for the Christian faith. They use the worship experience to try to get more people in the congregation. And then unfortunately, I'm learning the hard way, is that sometimes people's faith is built around the personality of the pastor. He may be very charismatic, and a lot of their faith rests on that. Whenever then that the pastor might be called out because he's teaching something wrong or doing something wrong, people's faith is challenged. They resist that. Whereas if one's faith is grounded in the facts and it's built in one's heart through the Holy Spirit, it can withstand some of the really depressing things that I'm hearing happen in the church. I did not want to look into this, but the more I looked into it, I began to realize how blessed I was, and many of us are, that are blessed to have been drawn to Christ through the testimony, the witness of the Holy Spirit in the heart, and also the study of facts of God's creation. And sometimes that requires studying chemistry and cellular biology and also archaeology. And then third on my list would be God's work in individual lives as we begin to see the transformed lives of people who convert to Christianity. And those who find the Lord, that's a testimony to God. So I do apologize for, I put the wrong calendar date on when this show is going to air, so I probably missed some viewers, but thankfully you all can watch this through recording. So please, anyone that's watching, if the audio is bad or something, let me know. What I usually do in that case is I shut off my camera and you'll get an icon like this instead. And that just kind of helps sometimes with the channel capacity to handle all the data traffic, and the audio gets better. So let me see if I could find the article I wanted to read today. I would have had it ready earlier, but a meeting that I had went a little longer than I expected, and so I was delayed. Let me see if I could find this. I hope I can find it. So I'd like to thank everyone in advance for their forbearance for me being so clumsy here. I thought I saved the link, and now I can't seem to find it. So that's bad on me. Let me see if I could find this. This is supposed to be for Fort Lauderdale. I hope I can. An image in his images here. Okay, I think Fort Lauderdale. Attendance drop. I think that was the Google search term I had. And unfortunately, oh, that might be it. Hang on, I think I remember. The Florida Bulldog. So, greet in his image, also known as Emery Moyna, and greetings, Kevin Blah. I thought, okay, let me just show this. I thought McLean Bible had problems. Fort Lauderdale is a really scary situation. And one reason I'm sharing this, I know it's depressing, is that sometimes we have invested too much at an individual level, our faith in, say, the charisma of a pastor. I certainly have. It's easy to look at someone and quote unquote idolize them and build them up and think they're very holy, and you don't want to have your image of them shattered, because to some level your faith depends on the good behavior of other people. I mean, that's even taught in the Bible, that the witness of the believers is very important for the walk of other people. And so when we see just bad things happening in Christendom, it can be very heartbreaking. But thankfully, the Lord has left his witness outside of. And on this channel, you know, I try to look at Christian testimonies that I think are not very flamboyant, but they're honest and sincere. I think many of us know individuals who are not heads of churches. Their source of money is not preaching or evangelizing, and we judge the Christian walk to be sincere. That's very important. There's evidence of God in creation, and about 50% of what we present here on this channel is the study of God's creation through the lens of science, observation, and experiment and theory and testing, and then through archaeology. If my faith rested on preachers, what they said and the way they behaved, and then on mission organizations and these charitable organizations, I think by now I would have been out of the faith. It is just too heartbreaking. So all this to emphasize the importance of studying what we call traditionally apologetics. I call it evidence and reasons, but I call it apologetics. And so I'm going to read some disturbing accounts. But the other thing is that I lost my train of thought. Goodness. Sorry. Um, if we study apologetics, evidence and reason for the Christian faith, we can endure kind of the problems of bad behavior in the church. Now, in the Old Testament, there was a lot of bad behavior by God's people, even people that God said had a good heart, like King David. If we looked at his criminal record, involved in the murder of someone that was innocent to cover up his adulteries, it'd be very easy to write him off and say that wasn't a good person at all. But thank God that it doesn't rely on sinful humans' behavior to bring us to the faith. It is God's witness in Jesus Christ. And I was just thinking also, like King Solomon, he wrote some wonderful books of the Bible, but he didn't follow it. So let me share, before I go further, let me try to share some scriptures. Matthew 23. So to help kind of deal with what I'm seeing happening in Christendom. I hold to this verse. We've seen some spectacular falls from grace among the leaders in the evangelical church. So let me share this here. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do." Let me read that again. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The scribes' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do. For they preach, but do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their deeds to be seen by others. For they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long, and they love the place of honor at feasts, and the best seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the marketplaces, and being called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And call no one your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Christ. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So Jesus has given us comforting words on how to deal with teachers that are hypocritical, and there's a lot of that going on. Some of us may be in churches where we're trying to affect change, and we have to endure with some things said from the pulpit that are false. And I'm wrestling through that situation. I don't think that as of right now, because there's still a lot of good churches in the United States, I'm not planning to stay in that environment if it persists. I'm staying because I have hope that something can change for the better. I'm not necessarily saying that that means the leadership will be overturned. If I'm able to at least minister to some people there, help open their eyes, and then they can make informed decisions, then I feel I would have served my purpose there. It's been heartening that I could at least communicate to people. It's like all of us are flawed. Even the pastors can make mistakes. If they can learn that lesson, then they have an advantage. They'll be able to be more discerning. And that's really about the only expectation I can have at this point. And Nicholas, thank you. It'll be at least an hour, so just take your time, brother. That might work out better anyway. So thank you. And I already announced that you'll be coming in to talk about some of your research on Marx, Karl Marx. So that's where I'm at. And so with that in mind, with the words of our Lord Jesus, I'm now going to cover this topic of Fort Lauderdale. And I have to tell you, I was on my knees after I was just, figuratively speaking, I was on my knees praying. I said, Lord, this is a terrible situation. So let me share this. Hopefully I'll remember to put this in the video description, the link. So the article is entitled, and this is May 12th, 2021. First Baptist of Fort Lauderdale splinters over money, power, and concerns for church's real estate riches. First Baptist of Fort Lauderdale splinters over money, power, concerns for church's real estate riches. I began to think more about Fort Lauderdale because someone posted in the comment section of one of my videos and said he's wishing us well, and I wished him well too. And I have to admit, I actually made a mistake. I didn't realize there were two churches in Florida that were going through tribulation, or, well, one being Naples and the other being Fort Lauderdale. I thought they were one and the same. And so I was surprised to hear about all the legal issues over membership and excommunication going on there. I thought it was all settled. I was mistaking Fort Lauderdale, the Fort Lauderdale church, with the Naples church. So whoever that was that left a comment, my heart goes out to you. He left a comment there because we're going through membership lawsuits at McLean Bible Church, but I didn't know the situation in Fort Lauderdale was so dire. And this is my way of expressing my sympathy by telling your all's story. As I'm coming to understand, it's pretty easy to diagnose sometimes what the problems are. It can be infinitely harder to figure out a cure or provide one. But I'm going to lift the situation up in prayer for you all there in Fort Lauderdale. So people may be wondering why all this fuss in the churches, and it's becoming increasingly clear there is a theme of money and power. Okay, so this is a picture of the church in Fort Lauderdale. It's enormous. You could even see here, like there's a covered parking lot here, and some auxiliary buildings, and then the main sanctuary, and then even more. This is listed in the article. It's a $125 million complex. Standing in the pulpit of First Baptist Church's historic sanctuary, lead pastor James Welch praised Lauderdale. It was May 2nd, the first Sunday after the church's trustees expelled an estimated 200 members. The group, concerned members of First Baptist Church, had tried to exert the influence that church bylaws promise congregants, only to be blocked at every turn. A mere 160 in-person worshipers, attendance fell before the pandemic, then plummeted. Heard Welch broadcast a warning. Talk to me, but don't talk to me, but don't talk about me. Talk to me, but don't talk about me. Or his family or church leaders, Welch said, according to audio tape excerpts obtained by Florida Bulldog. This gossip, this slander, it's going to end. People of God are done with it, he declared. But the rebels aren't leaving quietly. In public statements and interviews with Florida Bulldog, they described the church's descent from spiritual haven into hostile camps in the 2 years since Welch took over. And there's a picture of Welch. Latest totalitarian move. They blame the head pastor and his enablers for wielding raw power instead of engaging with the congregation to improve failing finances. They say they don't know of a previous instance when a dramatic drop in attendance or split into warring factions. A lot of them voted with their feet. That's why there's such a mass exodus, said Michael Smith, a former deacon and 35-year member who tried to represent the dissenters in arbitration. He said when Welch arrived in February 2019, average Sunday service attendance was about 1,100. In March 2020, before 760 attended. On May 2nd, combined attendance at Sunday services was about 260, Smith said. Smith was among those the trustee board dismembered, as he put it, on April 30th. That was cause for sadness, but maybe not a surprise considering the totalitarian steps that had been taken so far, he said last week. Welch and First Baptist responded to repeated requests for comments only by sending Florida Bulldog the April 30th termination announcement. It accuses the dissenters of attempting a hostile takeover of their own church by violating the bylaws. One of the targeted members, a former trustee, wrote the bylaws. Oh, this sounds eerily too familiar. Smith's personal response was to pray for everyone that's involved and just seek God's guidance on what the next step should be for all of us. The dissenters counted casualties, families driven away after decades of service, a popular Christmas pageant eliminated, a spirit of kindness suppressed, a tradition of democratic governance ignored, and a resilient bottom line trampled. They say all those things, plus what they've learned about Welch, suggests First Baptist $125 million earthly treasure is at risk. The church at Broward Boulevard in Northeast 3rd Avenue owns 7 acres of prime downtown real estate. Yes, and Emery here points out, yes, a hostile takeover. Yes, the irony is not lost. So someone who actually wrote the church bylaws is one of those being expelled. Yes, absolutely. The iron law of woke projection. They always accuse. Yes, and there are some very see in this. I'll continue. Welch, 46, came on board after a 3-year search to replace an interim lead pastor. He moved from New Orleans, where he ran the much smaller Harbor Community Church. On his watch, the church property lost its tax status as a religion and was redefined as a collective that rents out space. The few remaining Harbor Community congregants were sent to another church. Oh my goodness, how did this guy get put in charge of Baptist Church of Lauderdale? I don't know. Orleans Parish records show that in August 2018, the Harbor Church property valued at $1.3 million was transferred for $100 to an LLC associated with the mailing address of a tax accountant named Tim Baudier. Welch has described Baudier as his friends. Oh, this is not going to go down well. Let me read this again. Orleans Parish records show that in August 2018, the Harbor Church property valued at $1.3 million was transferred for $100 to an LLC associated with the mailing address of a tax accountant named Tim Baudier. Welch has described Baudier as his friend. I'm going to have to pause here and just comment. This is scary. This is God's money. Why are you going to sell this property for $100? If you're going to liquidate it even at half price at $600,000 or something, those funds can be used for something. So he sells it. So the pastor sells it to his friend. Sells it to his friend for $100. That just reeks. That just reeks of something. And some deals being cut off the book, so to speak. Deals and agreements. So let's just keep reading. This smells to high heaven. After Welch started at First Baptist, Baudier made an appearance as a quote-unquote consultant, and the church paid him thousands of dollars, Smith said. He asked Welch about Baudier's expertise, and the pastor said it was finances or procedures or something. I don't know what that means. Okay, here's a photo last week on lead pastor James Welch's Instagram account shows the church parking lot. Okay. I asked, what did we get from Baudier? And that was all that was revealed, Smith said. So Smith is one of the excommunicated. So now he's giving an account of this, looks to me a pretty shady character, this gentleman Baudier. The dissenters wonder if Welch values Baudier for his knowledge of how to turn a profit from what was a non-profit religious institution. I believe that's what he did in New Orleans, said Brian Keno, a spokesman for the dissident group. Keno researched Welch's background in New Orleans. The dissidents also wonder about Welch's construction industry connections, including Bob Moss, the co-builder of the former Marlins Park and rail stations, among other big projects. Welch and his family live in a house that is, according to property records, assessed at $2.4 million and owned by Moss. He did not respond to Florida Bulldog voice messengers left with his assistant. So Bob Moss is apparently some real estate magnate, and this pastor is living in a house that looked like it's being provided by Bob Moss. So Bob, hey, I have a 3-point. I'm going to read between the lines here, and it means I could definitely get this wrong. But my sense is you've got this very powerful real estate developer doing a $2.4 million house, and he says to the pastor, come here, you can live here. You can live in this really nice house. Do you know that's buying a lot of influence on a pastor? You know, he can have his wife and family liberally and in luxury. That's he could say, well, I'd like some payback. This does not smell good, okay? And this is also the same pastor who probably was there when the property of his former church in New Orleans got sold to a friend for $100. $1.3 million being sold to the pastor's friend for $100. Okay? So let's just keep going. Smith described Moss as a longtime member who is known for his generosity. I think he looked at this as an opportunity to serve the Lord by providing the new pastor and his comfortable accommodations. Well, that sounds better. Okay, so maybe I take that back. First Baptist member said SHIP has discussed selling 2 potential sites, part of a parking lot at 501 Northeast 2nd Street, a building used as a workshop for repairing pews and other items. Selling off parcels of land could become necessary to resolve the church's financial problems. The dissenters say Welch and subservient church leaders created these problems. A for-profit company in this situation would demand a forensic audit to determine the amount of waste and funds. Executive employees would be dismissed and face an investigation, says a January 24th letter from Dan and Deanna Weilhauer to the congregation. The couple had just left First Baptist after 30 years. He was a deacon. She worked for the church running Christmas pageant ticket sales. First Baptist is subject of a formal compliance review by the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. Jake Lapp of the council confirmed last week, "We are unable to provide further comment while the review is ongoing," he wrote in an email to the Florida Bulldog. Church opens a line of credit. ECFA accredits churches, giving them an independent stamp of approval, former Deacon Smith explained. "It doesn't make or break you, but it does add to your credibility," he said. "Accreditation can be yanked if a church fails to meet certain fiscal standards or provide requested information." Smith, the Wheelhowers, and others with direct or second-hand knowledge of church financials paint an alarming picture. For the first time in a generation, First Baptist had to open a line of credit. Despite a surplus of $466,000 at the close of the 2019 fiscal year, the church secured 2 loans totaling $550,000. Also, First Baptist applied payroll protection program loans in 2020 and 2021 for a total of over $1.1 million, according to the U.S. Small Business Administration PPP database. Couple questions. Spending choices. Yet Welch's spending is out of control, and his compensation is relatively high, according to the Wheelhowers' January 24th letter. They said Welch's $250,000 salary plus expenses is at least $50,000 more than the pastor at Calvary Chapel Megachurch on Cypress Creek Road in Fort Lauderdale. $250,000 for a congregation that is now 260 people. And he's just decimated. That church went from 1,100 members to 260, and he's still maintaining a $250,000 salary. A lot of the problems, obviously, since he excommunicated 200 members. And so, added to that, he obviously created a lot of dissent and discontent. And then the remaining who were discontent, that apparently I would suspect were trying to oust him, he got rid of them. So now it's only 260 people. $250,000 buys a lot of Hershey bars and coffee. So this pastor comes along. It's $300,000 in compensation. He has, $250,000, okay? $250,000 salary. He comes on board. The church is cut. The attendance is cut by 75%. And he's maintaining that salary. How's that? What a bust for a draft pick that is. Yes, and even Fort Lauderdale, that's insane. Yeah, money and power. I can tell you one reason. There's a lot of incentive for him to get rid of the dissenters. That consolidates his power. It's going to get harder and harder to fire him, given that. He can... I'll tell you where this could be very scary, is if they give him some sort of ability to sell the land. I don't know how that can be worked out, but someone who is sitting on a $125 million property and you hold all the cards, you hold all the control. There are any number of ways to leverage that even without selling the property. Just think about that. $125 million. All you had to do is first make everyone so discontent that they leave the church, and only those that remain are your supporters. Now you've got 100% control or close to it of the real estate. One could almost argue that that was a kind of fiendish, clever, although albeit fiendish strategy of you get rid of people that are opposing you by just inviting them to leave the church. And I've heard that line before. And all that remain are your diehard supporters. And then you have enough power to get rid of the dissenters by excommunicating them. Now you have all the cards. And the remainder then are just the sheep that follow you. And they may confer then more and more control to the leader. And now he's sitting on $125 million property. So let's go on. The Weilhauers provided several examples of questionable spending and program choices. They wrote that Welch trashed an expensive curtain used in the 2018 Christmas pageant for the 2019 pageant for a total cost of $100,000. Welch had the stage remodeled 3 times, they reported. Then he unilaterally ended the pageant that raised a third of the budgeted revenue. But there was room for a $77,000 hospitality line item. Each pastor had a mini fridge stocked with Perrier and special fox foil wrapped Cokes. The Wheelhousers wrote, a $77,000 hospitality line item? Meanwhile, programs that the couple thought were necessary were either cut way back or eliminated. Oh my goodness, this sounds so familiar. Including a men's golf tournament, a band for the teenagers, and women's Bible study. Oh, this sounds hauntingly familiar. Here at McLean, they canceled the single moms ministry. They canceled the paintball ministry, the skateboard ministry. I think they either had $0 budgets or very low budgets. So just saying, this sounds hauntingly familiar. It probably, if there were money involved, I'd say, well then, okay, if you're cutting that so you could have a hospitality line item of $77,000 that includes these special luxury refrigerators for the pastors, there's some problems with that. Men's Bible study moved to Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church, the Wheelhousers stated. Couples who missed their favorite Baptist programs dropped out. As far as I know, Coral Ridge is a solid church. They actually had a television special. They sent out a camera crew to interview me back in 2006. That was D. James Kennedy's church. The church gets most of its funding from tithing, charitable self-taxation by the congregation. Fewer active members means less income. It also means fewer congregants asking about money. They were unaware of problems in real time because the trustees in Welch kept everything quiet. Smith said the deacons used to get monthly reports in summer, but the practice ended with Welch's takeover. So did congregation-wide budget meetings. Sounds so familiar. Deacons who asked questions about spending drew rude and dismissive responses, but little information, Smith and others said. Since Welch arrived, the trustees have booted the more inquisitive deacons, almost half of the 24 men in the deacons group, according to Smith. Oh my goodness. You know, I understand how this can happen. It's not typical in churches to have a suspicious attitude toward your brothers and sisters. Um, I mean, it is a culture of trust. It really is a culture of trust where you expect people to behave well, and you don't want to insult them by trying to hold them accountable because there's an insinuation you're doing something wrong. And, I think honest people would say, I'm glad I can be held accountable. I'm glad I can be transparent. I'm glad you're interested. That's if you find a leader that is, kind of trying to conceal and evade, you better pounce on him. Better pounce on him. And I wish, it's just natural, especially you look up to church leaders, you expect them to behave well. But if you read your Bible, look at the kings of Judah. You have cases where you have some really good kings with good hearts, but then some of the kings that had started out well and then went corrupt, starting like with Solomon. And then you have the others that they were right with the Lord for a time and then they messed up. The Word of God is teaching us to be, to recognize this happens. I can diagnose things. I can't really recommend a cure for how to, how to get people to be a little bit more diligent in the congregation toward their leaders, because we want to think well of our leaders, that what they say on Sunday morning when they preach, we'd like to think they're not like Ed Litton, that is just plagiarizing and probably doesn't have any ethics about what he's really teaching, knowing full well he plagiarized it. But the congregation wants to believe the best because it's a great message. Of course, it's a great message. He plagiarized it from someone who did a good job. So let's continue. Deacons who asked questions about spending drew rude and dismissive responses, but little information, Smith and others said. Since Welch arrived, the trustees have booted the more inquisitive deacons, almost half of the 24 men in the deacons group, according to Smith. Church bylaws author expelled. I don't know anybody that has remained a deacon who disagreed with the direction of the leadership, he said. They have either resigned or been forcibly removed. One removal that shook Smith and others was that of James Geiger, 83, a lifelong First Baptist member, former trustee and author of the foundational church bylaws. Geiger and Smith stepped forward to arbitrate disputes between the dissident group and church leadership. The trustees responded April 26 by dismissing Geiger from the deacon body. Apparently, he was the first supporter of the dissident group to be expelled as both a deacon and member all through an email. That's what hurts, Smith said. This godly man who's given his time, talent, and treasure to be just set aside without any thought or love or concern. You wouldn't treat your employee at the gas station that way, he said. Dying member suffers rebuke. On May 2nd, Welch seemed to offer an answer to a question many opposed. What is the mission plan for First Baptist? When people think of what this church is known for, it's known for bold preaching, evangelism, discipleship, loving the Word of God, loving the poor, loving the disenfranchised, he said. But Geiger's ejection, the purge of all dissidents and their supporters 4 days later, and other episodes seem to contradict Welch's compassionate messaging. The chief pastor has changed the ambience of First Baptist. The Wellhauers suggested in their January 24th letter, during Welch's tenure, the spirit of our church went from being kind, giving, and caring to cold, aloof, with a perception of spiritual haughtiness, they wrote. For example, Shirley Class, a member dying of cancer, was rebuked from the pulpit because her oxygen machine was making a clicking sound. The letter said, she was ushered out of the sanctuary and never returned due to the embarrassment. She died a short time later. Oh man. I got to admit, I didn't read the whole article before I read it today. I see enough there that I like, that I feel is important to read, and then I'll read it on the air. And this is hitting me really hard. I mean, the sanctuary only had maybe 200, roughly, you take 260 and you split it among two services. How embarrassing could it be? I would be honored to have someone that wants to come to the Lord's sanctuary on their dying breath, and she gets treated like that. For example, Shirley Class, a member dying of cancer, was rebuked from the pulpit because her oxygen machine was making a clicking sound, the letter says. She was ushered out of the sanctuary and never returned due to the embarrassment. She died a short time later. In July, Elizabeth Imhoff, a former church administrative assistant and wife of Tim Imhoff, one of the deposed deacons, had to deal with a criminal complaint from First Baptist. Romney Ross, counselor, accused disgruntled employee Elizabeth Imhoff of tapping into a computer database without authorization, according to Fort Lauderdale police officer Negron Rodriguez' July 10th report. His captain told Rodriguez to contact Rogers, a former Fort Lauderdale city commissioner. After Imhoff's lawyer and Smith intervened, the police investigated. The criminal complaint was dropped due to insufficient evidence. A supplemental report dated August 28th states, it turned out that Imhoff, who remained at the church as a volunteer, had not been denied access to the database had not been denied access to the database she needed for her work. As a Sunday school teacher, Smith said he used the same member contact information. Imhoff was just trying to alert the congregation to an upcoming meeting, he said. Smith got involved because I thought that this church member was being slandered and accused of crimes she did not commit. Oh boy, this sounds familiar. There was a membership database that was freely handed out to ministry leaders. And then when the no vote was about to happen around June 30th, there was all these emails that someone broke into our database. We're contacting authorities to get an investigation and they'll be prosecuted. Well, that turned out to be false, because the subsequent email said, no, that was a false alarm. But the damage was done to people's reputations. All you needed to do was to circulate a nasty, slanderous rumor. Then kind of quietly say, oh no, it was just a rumor. We were mistaken. No one broke into our database. Don't be alarmed. Your privacy information secure with us. No one broke into it. That was just a misunderstanding. But from the pulpit on July 4th, it was being said, this database is being used for nefarious purposes. They have your birth date. They have your address. As if it's going to be maliciously used. So, yeah, I'm hearing all the same plays in this article that I'm seeing in my church. and God help our church. A.D. Robles pointed out that powerful verse in Psalms, and let me quote it. It is Psalm 55:21. His speech is smooth as butter, but war is in his heart. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. So we see this in this article. Rogers did not respond to a Florida Bulldog request for comment. A Change.org online petition calling for a vote of no confidence in Welch and his loyalists drew 847 signatures. The vote occurred in November, and Welch lost. Still, he keeps his First Baptist pulpit because his supporters ruled the vote was illegitimate. Oh, doesn't that sound familiar? At McLean Bible, the June 30th vote was illegitimate. One of the grounds was that someone probably used the church copier to make ballots, copies of the ballots, fill them out, and stuff the ballot box. That story falls apart for a number of reasons. One being that the church copier requires access, and that needs key access, card access, something like that. Secondly, the number of ballots given out was counted because they were issued. When I presented my ID to get my ballot, it was recorded on a computer. They know that the number of ballots counted was less than the number of ballots issued. If there were ballot stuffing by this copier process, that number would be reversed, and it wasn't. Apparently, someone may have been so disgruntled that when they got their ballot, they probably shredded it. They didn't want to vote. And so that's why we had one vote less in the ballots counted than the number of ballots issued. Yes, the same firm, by the way, that was involved in the counting at Fort Lauderdale. They're involved in something with Fort Lauderdale, Holland and Knight. They're the same law firm that did the counting at McLean Bible. Now, I'm not suggesting anything nefarious, because if they did miscount knowingly, that could get a law firm in big trouble. I'm not expecting that they would do something that stupid. It's not worth risking your law firm to do a favor like that for your buddy. That's just my opinion. So anyone watching, I'm not making that accusation. Recently, former member Deanna Weilhauer said any change would come too late. Even if we got rid of James Welch, there's really no church left anymore. And that's it. That's it. Oh my goodness. Dear Lord, help us. Now, if I may, I can diagnose this and I feel quite helpless. It's like, well, what's the call to action? We need to straighten this out. I have no answers, guys, except to just throw myself at the feet of the Lord Jesus and say, Lord, you've foreseen this. Help me not to be discouraged. Help me to carry on. And so help me to stand firm. Help me to stand firm. I tell you, if my faith were in the church leadership, if it were built because of the church leadership, I'd be gone. And that's why I feel that this the study of apologetics, evidence and reasons, the study of creation science, molecular biology. I know it sounds so off the wall, but it's in times like this that it really helps people with their faith, because you know God is real, and it's not based on the charisma or the way a preacher will present himself. This is disturbing, but let me read from Acts chapter 20. Acts chapter 20, starting at verse 17. Now from Miletus he sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church to come to him. And when they came to him, he said to them, "You yourselves know how I lived among you the whole time from the first day that I set foot in Asia, serving the Lord with all humility and with tears through the plots of the Jews, how I did not shrink from declaring to you anything that was profitable, in teaching you in public and from house to house, teaching you in public and from house to house, testifying both to Jews and to Greeks of repentance toward God and of faith in our Lord Jesus Christ. And now behold, I'm going to Jerusalem, constrained by the Spirit, not knowing what will happen to me there, except that the Holy Spirit testifies to me in every city that imprisonment and afflictions await me. But I do not count my life of any value, nor as precious to myself, if only I may finish my course and the ministry that I received from the Lord Jesus, to testify to the gospel of the grace of God. And now, behold, I know that none of you among whom I have gone about proclaiming the kingdom will. I testify to you this day that I am innocent of the blood of you all. For I did not shrink from declaring to you the whole counsel of God. Pay careful attention to yourselves and to all the flock, in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, to take care of the church of God, which he obtained with his own blood. I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among you, your own selves, will arise men speaking twisted things to draw away disciples after them. Therefore be alert, remembering that for 3 years I did not cease night or day to admonish everyone with tears. And now I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and to give you the inheritance among all those who are sanctified. This was foreseen by God. This was foreseen by God. And 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 so what I see happening at the Fort Lauderdale church is savage wolves coming in. And the apostle, when he saw it happening to the church at Ephesus, 3 years with tears, that's the prophecy that God had given Paul. He knew that this was going to happen. And so when I read these sad tidings, it's like, yeah, the New Testament, the Apostle Paul had warned God's church that things like this can and will happen. And he says, "And now I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and to give you the inheritance among all those who are sanctified." At some point, we just have to, it's going to be us and the Lord. The world around us will fall apart, but that's what we have. We have the word of his grace, able to build us up. Because I could tell you, I was reading this, it can really weigh you down. It can really weigh you down. So let me see what else is on the docket here. There have been some great And Dr. Sandy Pigeon is here. Brother, thank you. Sandy, I don't know what I'd do without you, brother. Sandy and Emery here and everyone, a lot of the people in the chat came to my side when I really needed some friendship. So thank you. Okay, so I talked about corruption of God's people in the Old Testament contrasted with the list of heroes in Hebrews 11. So let me just share Hebrews 11. And there's really just one verse there that I want to focus on. Okay, so let me just start at verse 32 just to help with the contrast. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouth of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. So this is describing faith. That's the kind of story I'd like to hear. But then it continues. And let's see if I'll just share it here. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released, so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They were in caves and in holes in the ground. So God can do just miraculous, wonderful, eye-catching miracles that are the first part of that passage. And then you have the other part where there's persecution and destitution, and I'm just like, oh Lord, I really want happily ever after in this life. I got to admit, it's kind of, if not for myself, for my loved ones. And Hebrews is kind of tough medicine. And I think I had to maybe focus a little bit on that. I said, Lord, if this sort of difficulty is facing your people, because I certainly lived through a very prosperous era, probably the most prosperous and blessed era, materially speaking, in world history. Living in the United States here from the 60s till today. It's been a glorious place materially, and also a place that was still relatively rich in the gospel, at least, the first 20 years or so that I was here in the United States. It was glorious here. Maybe at the time I'd realize it, but now looking back, it's glorious because we see where things are now. And so I just wanted to share that in Hebrews. Some tough times fell on some really great people. And I was just praying today, God help us through what we're going through, especially after reading about Fort Lauderdale. I read from Matthew 23. It talked about how to deal with leaders who are not walking the walk. Jesus said, do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do. Listen to their teaching to the extent that it's right and follow it. So when I hear a pastor just reading straight from Scripture, and I could read it myself, but when I was hearing David Platt on July 18th read from 1 Corinthians 13, I accepted it. I said, that is the word of the Lord. Some of the other stuff he said, especially negative about my blog, I ignored. He said it's ungodly for you to come to Sal's blog or other blogs. I presume A.D. Robles' blog is now very much higher on the list, thank God, because I don't want to be the center of so much negative attention. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit of Jerry Falwell. He is Jerry Falwell Jr. His dad I had respect for. I had some problems with his dad, who seemed to think by his comment, Jerry Falwell Sr. said something offensive to me, but a lot of everything else he said was okay. The thing that he said that was offensive, he said the United States, I think, has to be around for a while because they're the only one with the money that can spread the gospel. I wanted to say that's so insulting. The gospel is not spread like some marketing campaign, slick marketing campaign. It's by the power of God. God did not need money to overtake the Roman Empire with Christianity. It's like to think that the lack of the spread of the gospel is because of lack of money. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. That's not what the Bible teaches. That was the only thing that really offended me about Jerry Falwell Sr. Sadly, we have Jerry Falwell Jr., and I'm going to cover that. So we have heard various scandals in the young earth community, and some people know who I'm talking about. But Liberty University is a young earth, or was, or kind of is, a young earth creationist university. They at least have a large biology faculty that are creationist, which is heartening. And I'm sorry I have to say this, but it's like, guys, be on your guard. Be on your guard. Just because someone names the name of Christ, and if they're leaders, it's no guarantee that they'll stay good. There are a lot of them, I think, started out good, and there's just slowly walked that, slowly eroded their integrity and went down that slippery slope to being corrupt and earthly. And I just need to say what I'm about to read is not family friendly, because this is just so just the accounts are not, I'm not going to get too graphic. This is from Wikipedia. So Falwell. So let me just put this. This is on Wikipedia, and I know a lot of Christians that studied at Liberty. Falwell is married to Becky Tilley and lives on a farm in Bedford County, Virginia. They have 3 children, among them businessman Jerry Trey Falwell III. Falwell is the vice president of university operations at Liberty University and also owns Alton Hostel, which he also called the Miami Hostel in Miami South Beach. In 2019, Reuters reported that Falwell asked Trump fixer Michael Cohen for a personal favor to help get rid of photos described by Cohen as being the kind that would typically be kept between husband and wife. At least 3 of the photos were later discovered to be of Falwell's wife. Okay, I'm going to skip that. Oh boy, okay, I won't skip it. According to Brandon Abrosino, longtime Liberty officials close to Falwell told me the university president has shown or texted his male confidants, including at least one employee who worked for him at Liberty, photos of his wife in provocative and sexual poses. At Liberty, Falwell is very, very vocal about his sex life, in the words of one Liberty official. And I'll move on. In 2012, Falwell and his wife stayed at the Fontainebleau Miami Beach luxury hotel, where they met and became friends with a man in his early 20s who worked there as a pool attendant. The Falwells financially backed their son, Jerry Trey Falwell III, and the man in a 2013 purchase of a South Beach hostel called the Alton Hostel, which operates under the name the Miami Hostel. A lawsuit was filed against the Falwells and the man in 2015, dismissed and then refiled in August 2017. The plaintiffs, a man and his son, claimed they had helped to think of the hostel business idea but had then been wrongfully left out of the venture. In May 2020, after Virginia Governor Ralph Northam implemented a mask mandate amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Falwell criticized the mandate and tweeted a picture of a custom mask in Northam wearing blackface. Wow. Falwell apologized for the tweet in early June after being widely criticized by African American alumni for being insensitive to the black community. In August 2020, Falwell published a photograph on Instagram, since deleted, of himself with his jeans unzipped and his hand around the waist of a young woman whose shorts are similarly unzipped. The image was taken at a party on a private jet, which Falwell later explained was a costume party themed after the Trailer Park Boys television series. In the photo, Falwell was holding a glass of dark liquid, and in the caption he wrote, "I promise that's just black water in my glass." It was a prop only. Journalists noted the partial undress and consumption of alcohol were among actions that violate the Liberty University Code of Conduct. A former instructor at the university, Congressman Mark Walker, called for Falwell's resignation. On August 7th, Liberty University announced that Falwell would be taking an indefinite leave of absence from his positions. In late August, Reuters contacted Falwell and his wife with their initial reporting on his wife's alleged affair with a pool attendant they had met in 2012. Shortly after, on August 23rd, 2020, Falwell announced in a public statement that his wife had an improper relationship several years earlier with a man who later threatened to reveal the affair unless we agreed to pay him substantial monies. On August 24th, Reuters published the report that the man was the pool attendant with whom Falwell had invested in the hostel. The man, now 29 years old, said he began a sexual relationship with the Falwells when he was 20. He claimed that the affair started the same month he met the couple, in March 2012, and continued into 2018. He claimed to have frequent sexual encounters with Becky Falwell while Jerry Falwell Jr. looked on, sometimes in the same room and sometimes remotely via camera. The man shared audio tapes, emails, and texts with Reuters as evidence for the veracity of his assertions about the relationship. Later in the day, on August 24th, it was reported it was reported that Falwell had agreed to resign from Liberty University, though Falwell denied the report. An anonymous university official told the Washington Post that there had been a delay in negotiations. On August 25th, Falwell confirmed that he had resigned. In October 2020, Falwell sued Liberty University for damaging his reputation, but in December 2020, dropped the lawsuit. On April 15, 2021, Liberty sued him for $10 million for breach of contract and fiduciary duty. The suit also alleged that Falwell failed to disclose the university's board of trustees his scandalous affair and personal impairment by alcohol. Oh, Lord, help us all. And I don't know what to say except, Lord, keep us all in your hand, Lord. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I'm ashamed to admit when I hear of all these stories, it's easy to feel kind of like morally superior, but I examined my own heart. I said, Sal, you'd be tempted to do that. You see it in the Old Testament. You had someone like Solomon. It said of him, he loved the Lord. That was early in his life. But then you saw how he turned out. And there's sometimes I kept bad company, especially being in the casino industry, okay? I know how it can corrupt you. And I just thinking, oh Lord, but for the grace of God, we could all live considerably more wretched lives than the ones we live now. Just, so, all right. So let me see. Nicholas, hang on. All right. So Nicholas, we're about to do the Gramsci stuff. If you want to join, I sent you a link in your email. But before we move on, and speaking of casinos, this is just a rant, totally rant. It has nothing to do with anything. There is this thing, 2012 was my last, 2000, yeah, 2014 January was my last time in a casino. It's about 7 years ago. And I really don't have much desire to go back. I didn't like the environment. I liked the game. I liked having a chance to use my brain. And that's something that developed because I was recovering from the loss of my father. I didn't recover well. And that was something that helped me cope. But there is this thing called the Vdara Death Ray. And I'll show a picture of that is, I was showing pictures. The thumbnail is based on pictures such as this of the Vdara Hotel. And you could see it has kind of that concave shape, like a parabolic mirror. I'll type Cheryl here. She asked about Gramsci. So there's this parabolic shape. So now let me show what the effect is. People who know what parabolas do know that it can concentrate either sound or light into a very small space. And so what ended up happening is it created what became known as the Vdara Death Ray. So if you happen to be in certain parts near the hotel, like near the pool where the sunbathers are, and wherever when the sun hits, it goes into this parabolic concentration. Actually there are cooking systems where you use a parabolic mirror to focus sunlight and you can actually cook things. And this Vdara Death Ray was just zapping all sorts of people near the pool. And I think I have a picture of it also, depending on the time of day, it can also zap people in the highway. See if I have a picture of the highway zapping. And it's one of those things that I think no one actually anticipated it would be like that. I don't know if this diagram helps. Let's show it now. So the sunlight is coming in on the red here from the highway. So I checked that. It's not in the highway. That's just the direction of the sunlight coming in from the highway. It bounces off the Vdara building, which is concave, and then it hits the pool. And so there's some funny pictures of this because there are people who are there Um, and they have these waitresses attending to you. They're in the pool and serving cocktails. And this is kind of a funny picture. You could see the Vdara Death Ray as the sun's moving. It's kind of scorching here. And it's about to hit the poor waitress and the guy at the pool. So that's all I had about the Vdara Death Ray. Just something totally silly. So, Nicholas, would you like to come on now? If you wanted to talk about Karl Marx, otherwise I will. Um, we were talking about Karl Marx. The relevance of this to all that we're seeing happen is that we had Karl Marx, who's an evil man. He was quoted as saying just terrible things, that he felt he was destined for hell, that he forfeited heaven, that he was once true to God. He had very dark writings outside of his book Das Kapital. Okay, Nicholas said that that's a, Nicholas, the email that we had earlier, that I sent earlier this afternoon should have the link. If not, I'll just resend it. So give me a moment. I can resend. I'll also resend. Hang on. So if the viewers will indulge me a little bit, I'm going to try to send this to Nicholas ASAP. So I'm going to send another one just in case, Nicholas. So, oh, he's here. Great. Well, I don't have to send this then. So big hand to Nicholas.
And I have myself on mute. Okay, yeah, I just had to mute the YouTube there.
Great.
And I thought I'd been on this interface with you once, but it seems unfamiliar. Okay, good to see you, Sal.
Good to see you too.
I thank our God for you, for how you just did what you can with your channel, and then, God multiplied it like loaves and fishes, did he not?
Yes. And again, it's really easy to just go survey the world and talk about all the bad things. That's easy to do. This is happening in our churches. I totally did not see that. So for most of my life, even though that there were church scandals along the way, I never thought it would get this bad. So in the case of the 3 times I've seen pastor that happens, the church went on. It was able to recover. Another instance was the pastor was lying. That was at McLean Bible. Denny Henderson, that's well known. He was removed after a month. The church went on. It was painful. Then in a congregation here, the pastor had domestic issues. He got caught beating his wife and kids. And it's like, okay, I think one reason it didn't shake too many people's faith is like those are the things where someone can, many Christians can imagine themselves slipping in those ways where they have an affair or they don't tell the truth for whatever reason because they're embarrassed. They want to save face. Strong temptation. Some people have anger issues with their family. And the pastor in question had an alcohol problem, but I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but I was very concerned. He had a chronic back condition that took him to the NIH. He was in chronic pain. So I can understand that he's trying to alleviate that pain by any means. And it just sets people on edge. But he was taking it out on his wife. Okay. But kind of like what you just heard with Baptist Church in Fort Lauderdale. And she's trying to be there. You're muted, Nicholas.
You cut out after the word Fort Lauderdale for
Yeah,
a
the
second.
cancer patient at Fort Lauderdale who was there at the worship service in a mostly empty sanctuary, and they ushered her out, and she died shortly thereafter. She's trying to be before the presence of the Lord in the assembly. Jesus said, when you prepare a feast, invite the halt, the maimed, and the blind. You know, if someone is on their dying breath, they've done everything they can to be there in the sanctuary before the Lord. If our pastor, especially now that the sanctuary is almost emptied out because you've driven so many, but if I had been the pastor, I'd stop the service and say, let us have a prayer for this woman. Obviously, she's terminally ill. Let us send her. Don't treat her like some embarrassment to the church. She's honoring God with her last breath. That is just what I call appalling behavior. And then in addition to all the financial misdealings and the dirty dealings, that's not the sort of stuff that's the sort of stuff that I did not see coming. And then what Jerry Falwell Jr. was getting involved in. It's just that I can understand some of the other events that have deposed pastors, but what's happening like at Fort Lauderdale, it's like criminal. It's not just a good guy that fell. It's like a criminal guy got in the pulpit. And that's what I'm having problems with. But concurrent with that is this whole thing of the woke gospel. It seems to attract criminal elements to preach it. The woke gospel is been sometimes has origins in Gramsci's cultural Marxism. And of course, cultural Marxism has its roots in Marxism. So maybe for the next half hour, as we close out our show, maybe we could talk about some of those quotes that I found about Karl Marx. And then we can talk, I think we might do a reading on Gramsci and then close out the channel, the stream tonight. So to tell the viewers, Nicholas, about some of your research on this.
Okay, well, the first thing I'll mention is that how I classify it is spiritually, because that's what I think is actually significant. And also, when we talk about it in a political sense, they'll use all sorts of redefinitions to say, well, I'm not that category or I'm not that one and all of that. So I just try to be really honest that, I refer to it usually as the Marxist spirit or the woke spirit. I refer to them as being the same spirit. And I have the screen share ready for you. Someone has the article. Oh, you want me to give like a quick introduction? Okay,
introduction about you said you had done some research. You had source materials and stuff, and
yeah,
not handy right now, but you had compiled it, or if you could explain it to me.
It's just a bunch of web links, and so I actually found on it's called Marxism.org or something. I have it open right now, but it's elsewhere. So let me see, Marxists.org. And they had to take down the poems because of who had the copyright on them. But I was able to find that to sort of verify all the other people. I was able to find that to verify like all the other people that quote the poems, just to show that one of the poems, same title, is on there. But most of the poems I have on just a poetry website. Someone has compiled, I think, 51 of his poems on there. So then you have to like sign up to get the 51st poem because it's kind of funny because I signed up to get all the poems and there was only one more on a huge list of like 50 poems. Yeah, so there's access to all the poems just on this standard poetry website. What I
So
put
what
up
we can,
first,
yeah. So what
and I'll
I,
zoom out so it'll all be on the screen.
yeah. So I would be interested in compiling this as a reference document at some point to help people study this better. And I have to admit, why was this never taught to me in school? Why was it never taught to me in church? It's too relevant to our existence on Earth. So I'll blow it up. I just wanted to have a chance to talk. So we can
Okay.
read some of this, and go ahead. Whatever's on
Well,
your mind here, brother.
okay. Well, I thought the best place to start was with just a really quick summary. So this is someone named Tom Woods. Now I think the point mostly is that the poems actually speak through like spiritual expression, so that we can assess for ourselves, so we're not taking someone's word for it. But this is another witness that I agree with. And then there was Kregner, is that how it's pronounced? Who you quoted him because he wrote the book that
Mm-hmm.
tipped me off to this topic. And if I remember right, though, unfortunately he's Catholic. But well, that's neither here nor there, I guess. But yeah, so that tipped me off to that there was like all this poetry to show satanic spirituality. And one thing about this sort of Satanism is that it's not like the fictional sort of Satanism, it's not gory imagery on a death metal album cover or something. This is like more along the lines of Luciferianism, being in the place of God, that kind of like real Satanism. Um, so I think that's enough of an intro. So it's titled Karl Marx Wrote Creepy Poetry. Um, that's an odd topic to write about, but I was reminded of Marx's poems today by way of contrast with a left-wing poem I read that was just awful, lifeless, and bland. I'm sparing you that one. At least Marx is bold and creepy. Murray Rothbard quoted from Marx's poems in his book Classical Economics. Rothbard was unconvinced by those who say these poems were the products of a youthful Marx and of no significance in understanding the man. And yeah, I think it's actually very obvious that you start out tapping into the spirit before you can become this madman prophet of the false spirit and like craft it into, you have to start with the spiritual source of the doctrine you're making before you have the doctrine. So disconnecting the fact that they're earlier from where it went, it's obvious that it actually is connected. So to a Christian, I think it's obvious. So here's a quote. Thus, worlds I would destroy forever, since I can create no world, since my call they never notice. I think we all see how obviously that correlates with what's going on with leftist terrorism, is what I call it, because, they're trying to do political action by using violence to scare people into obedience. It says, and then I will be able to walk triumphantly, like a god, through the ruins of their kingdom. Every word of mine is fire and action. My breast is equal to that of the Creator.
Can you
And
read that again? Can you read that again?
definitely, then I will be able to walk triumphantly, like a god, through the ruins of their kingdom. Every word of mine is fire and action. My breast is equal to that of the Creator. And I shall build my throne high overhead. Cold, tremendous shall its summit be. For its bulwark, superstitious dread. For its marshal, blackest agony. And I want to mention to everyone, I took one poetry class in college, and it's a good chance to assess where I'm at with poetry. And I think it's fair to say that I am rather expert on the subject. I'm not necessarily studying various poets, but just the use of words poetically as a form. And the spiritual significance of words, from language to language, in a language. I've experienced with that and stuff too. So just to give people a little information on that, because I do a good amount of very careful translating from Greek to English, for the Bible, for example, and do a lot of word studies and etymology in English or in Greek or Hebrew. So it all kind of helps. But yeah, do you know what a bulwark is, Sal? I don't remember off the top of my
No,
head what a
no, I
bulwark
don't.
is.
I don't know.
Okay, I am going to look up these words just very quickly because the meaning is exactly what's significant. So bulwark is a defensive wall, and that was vaguely what I thought it was. And then this other word that I wasn't sure what it meant. Marshal. I think that means a law, right? So his law is blackest dread. Is that what that would be? Or I guess I should have put definition for this one. And sorry to be slowed down here, but okay, a high official in the household of a medieval king. So yeah, like high official or high officiality is blackest dread. Okay, that makes sense. So the defense, superstitious dread. Okay, and the this high official, blackest agony. Okay, so let's move on though. And see this sword? The Prince of Darkness sold it to me. And that's actually the same quote translated differently as you read yesterday. So that's what I meant, that these sometimes are translated differently. And with Satan, I have struck my deal. Chalks the signs, beats time for me. I play the death march fast and free. And yeah, a lot of these are just go without explanation. I think the people in the audience know enough to hear what's going on here. And I shall howl gigantic curses on mankind. Ha! Eternity, she is an eternal grief. Ourselves being clockwork, blindly mechanical, made to be the foul calendars of space and time, having no purpose, save to happen, to be ruined, so that there shall be something to ruin. If there is something which devours, I'll leap within it. Though I bring the world to ruins, the world which bulks between me and the abyss, I will smash to pieces with my enduring curses. I'll throw my arms around its harsh reality. Embracing me, the world will dumbly pass away, and then sink down to utter nothingness. Perished with no existence. That would be really living.
Can you read that whole poem again? I was writing to
Yeah.
Cheryl a little
Okay.
bit. I wanted to thank her for, she was providing a link to Agenda, which talks about Marxism. I saw it earlier. I didn't know it's available for free. That's great. So feel free to read that again. I'm sorry to ask
Okay.
you again.
Would you mind if, as long as the audience is hearing it twice, I could go to this translation from Marxists.org? This is from a play he wrote, and it was Mark. It's the
No,
exact same
I
spot.
wanted to hear that what you just read.
Okay, it's the same one. It's a
Okay.
different source. So
Okay.
this is on Marxist.org, and this is the entire play here that he wrote, and it's like his desire to do a play like Faust, or is it that? Well, I think Faust was one of his favorites, and then another Mephistopheles is maybe the character in Faust. I don't really have that stuff memorized all that well, but it's satanic, right? And it was his favorite stuff was like the satanic ones. Faust was one of his favorites. So this is sort of his Faust, and it's a play, and this just starts a couple lines earlier. But all lost. The hour is now expired, and time stands still. This pygmy universe collapses. Soon I shall clasp eternity and howl humanity's giant curse into its ear. Eternity, it is eternal pain. Death, inconceivable, immeasurable, an evil artifice contrived to taunt us, who are but clockwork, blind means wound up to be the calendar fools of time, to be only that something thus at least might happen, and to decay, that there might be decay. The worlds must have had need of one thing more, dumb, searing agony to send them whirling. Death comes to life and puts on shoes and stockings. The sorrowing plant, the stone's inert erosion, the birds that find no song to tell the pain of their ethereal life, the general discord, and the blind striving of all with a capital A to shake itself out of itself, be crushed in quarrel. This now stands up and has a pair of legs. And it seems it's much different, isn't it? So I'll go back to the shorter one here. I'm not sure exactly why there's the difference, but that other one, I think this one was translated differently, so it's easier to understand.
I think it has the ellipsis. Do you see it with the 3?
Oh, okay, yes. Oh, okay. So I apologize because I didn't notice the ellipses. I would have just stuck with a shorter one. I didn't realize I was going into a way longer quote. So we'll just go back to the shorter one. I apologize for a mistake there. I shall howl gigantic curses on mankind. Ha, eternity, she is an eternal grief. Ourselves being clockwork, blindly mechanical, made to be the foul calendars of space, of time and space, having no purpose save to happen, to be ruined, so that there shall be something to ruin. If there is something which devours, I'll leap within it, though I bring the world to ruins, the world which bulks between me and the abyss. I will smash to pieces with my enduring curses. I'll throw my arms around its harsh reality. Embracing me, the world will dumbly pass away, and then sink down to utter nothingness. Perished, with no existence. That would be really living. And one detail, I think most of it speaks very well for itself, but one detail is the world dumbly passing away. Like it doesn't even get to speak as it passes away. I don't know exactly what the significance of that is, but I think given the different things going on in these times, it was pretty obvious for everyone. And
Yes.
So this guy says sarcastically, the writer of the article, nah, I'm sure none of that has anything to do with the mature Marx at all. So it sure does explain a lot, though, about Marxism and about the forces we're up against these days. And so, yeah, I agree with that. And
Yeah.
I would
So we'll go. I was about to say we'll probably cover more of this. We'll have time to review some of this later. And so I want to thank Nicholas for compiling this and finding this material. And he was about to compile all that he had, and I said, "No, just time out. We'll cover this some more because this is worth studying. It's polluted human thinking, and it's still being pursued. That's one thing I don't get when it's so obvious. But on the other hand, if one is an atheist, and Marx himself said, communism, it begins with atheism. There's a connection there that is worth exploring too. So there's just a lot here that that's going to require probably more time to make a stronger case because it doesn't always just leap out. The thing about Marx's writing and a lot of this philosophical, it just goes on and it's not clear. And when you're trying to make a case that it's misguided and evil, it just becomes very tiresome. Sometimes someone like Kegnor can distill it for us and show why it's wrong. But sometimes going through all of that, it's like, how do you show this is wrong and be able to do it succinctly and efficiently? Because
well, it's easy in a Christian context. I think it's impossible in a secular. Well, it's not impossible. It's just like people can just think whatever they kind of want about it, you know? Like, these are people who, like, they watch horror movies like it's a casual thing, you know? So,
So yeah, for
the
me, it
world
was like
differently.
I get that Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin, just horrible leaders. I couldn't tie it to their. I couldn't see why Marxism would necessarily lead to the tyranny. But then I began to Kegnor. Sometimes you'll just find it in one sentence when they said when to be able to liquidate private property, you have to take it from people. And I'm like, okay, that explains a lot. Um, that when people protest, I mean, a state that's powerful enough to take everything of yours and concentrate it in the hands of the state, and the state is basically corrupt leaders, yeah, now it makes sense. So people will say, well, that's not Marxism the way Mao did it or Stalin with all that killing. And I'm just like, well, what is then? He's making very bad assumptions about human nature. I mean, is are the leaders that promote Marxism and they find it beneficial to their luxurious lifestyles? Are they going to suddenly come on board and have a lot of compassion on everybody? Why would you expect people in a Darwinian viewpoint to be compassionate? Why would you expect people that have no moral grounding except their own whims to be compassionate, to think about right and wrong, uh, or to value utopia for everyone? It could be just as well that someone's just going to value their own utopia at the expense of everyone else. And that was Mao Zedong. He, he wanted to perpetuate the illusion that he had figured out how to make incredible crop yields all the while the populace was actually suffering through famine because of his stupid policies. So he's able to retain power. So why would we expect collectively that everyone's going to be on the same page of trying to build a utopia? And it took me a while to think about that because people say, well, they didn't implement Marxism. And it's like, well, why do you think that Marxism could be implemented anyway? It's a contradiction in terms. You're expecting people to be on the same page, but then you remove all their ethics by saying there's no God, and then you replace it with just human whims. What do you expect's going to happen? And so maybe was able to connect the dots. I could see that the outcome
Who
was
was that?
there.
It cut out on you. Who
Huh?
connected the dots? It cut out on you when you were saying who connected the dots.
Yeah, only in the last 2 weeks I finally connected the dots. We had. Thanks for calling me when I cut out. I don't know what the cause of that is. So anyway, when I connected the dots only in the last 2 weeks, I could tell that we had these very evil, tyrannical nations. I mean, nations that suffered the tyranny of communist leaders, and that they're communist leaders, but I couldn't see why it necessarily got that way because, I mean, I can sort of guess, but I couldn't really connect the dots as to why. And then sometimes when I point that out, they'll say, well, that's not really Marxism. And I'm like, okay, there's something wrong here. And it's like, it's built on a very bad premise. For Marxism to work, you have to get everyone on the same page that this is right. And it's like, how are you going to enforce, how are you going to get people to accept that this is the moral and purposeful thing to do when you don't have anything but human whims to appeal to? You know, if morals are driven by human whims and likes and whatever they come up with rather than morality coming from above, one can't expect the communist ruling party to suddenly become oh so compassionate for everyone, that they'll suddenly have goals that it's like, oh yeah, we want utopia for everyone. We want the wealth to be spread because they're living such a good life. Why would they want the wealth to spread? They have no ethical constraint to say, no, this is wrong. It's better that I give up my luxurious lifestyle for the benefit of starving people. What's the basis of having any conscience in an atheistic world except your own whims? And so if your morals are slowly eroded, um, and you're just feeding on your enjoyment, you feel, you have no reason to try to regain your conscience and sense of morality. Uh, at least someone with a Christian grounding is like, yeah, I believe in God. I'm accountable to him on judgment day. I can't behave like this. I have to try to stem kind of my strong desires for worldly luxuries and comforts for the sake of my fellow man. So that's what I finally put to get two and two together. Because up until that point, like if I were debating a Marxist, he'd say, oh yeah, you can't cite the Soviet Union or Pol Pot's regime or Cuba or any Venezuela or North Korea or Red China. That's not really Marxism.
Oh, brother, oh, okay, I was on the wrong screen. I was seeing you on YouTube still talking, and I didn't hear you. But yeah, I confronted some atheists way back when on this topic, like not a whole year ago, but somewhere back towards that, And I I had read that Marx said something about like the necessity of violence for his revolution in his Communist Manifesto. So I looked it up. I don't know where I put it, so I can't just pull it up right now, but I can have it ready for next time I'm on, just to show people. But in the Communist Manifesto, he talks about how it must be violent, and then he immediately afterwards talks about hating secrecy. So he's like, let's not even be secret that it's going to be violent. And this is right there in like the last paragraph of the book itself. There's a couple things attached to the end, but like I think it's the very last paragraph, but it might be like the second to last. But so right there, as the book's coming to like its culmination and conclusion, it's like, you got to be violent, workers of the world. He's like talking to the workers or whatever, as I recall. And that might be sort of the answer to why it always goes that way, because if it has to be wrongfully done like that, then it can only draw wrongful people who will do it. So the people who are in power doing it, they have to be violent, because Marx himself said, and that's why I want to tell you this, because it's in Marx's own book. It's not the Soviet Union. It's not China, Marx himself said that violent revolution was the only way to get revolution. Mario, you're on mute. Sorry, brother. I wasn't looking at the screen for a second there. So I thought that might help you with your question that you were just addressing.
Yeah, sorry, I was distracted by the side chat. I'm trying to. There's a discussion going on there. I don't think it's very productive. I think you're muted now, so I think both of us are getting a little tired.
Yeah, so, I'm definitely tired. Well, I just want to mention what I'll bring next time. Alludes a lot more to propaganda and stuff like that, and it's probably some of the quotes we just read too, but the entire poem with that stuff. So yeah, we have a good one next time, but it will take a little bit of explanation of exegesis, because not everyone reads such poetry easily.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for looking through all this. And now I'll just finish on Gramsci and then we'll shut the stream down. So, um,
Oh, well, as far as collected sources, I do also have regarding the suicides of Marx's daughters and
oh,
what,
yes. Yes.
what Lenin said about it.
Tell us what you found
Okay.
briefly.
Yeah, I found in the PDF what I did was I was looking on Wikipedia. But the one thing I like about Wikipedia is that you can pursue to follow to the sources. And in that case, well, I'll mention first both of Karl Marx's daughters killed themselves. Um, one of them in like a communist suicide pact with her husband. And this is what's interesting is Lenin, he said that um, once we're too old to be useful, we need to do the same and kill ourselves. I didn't have that link ready at the moment, unfortunately. I was just trying to mention that I have it as a summary of more of the things I have. But yeah, Lenin said explicitly that when we can no longer serve, he might have used the word the revolution, that we should likewise kill ourselves. And he was honoring her for killing herself, her and her husband. And then the other daughter was with a man who was very similar to Marx in the sense that Marx is like a mooch and all this. And I don't know if this man was a mooch per se, but it seems clear that he was using Marx's daughter because he was in the whole communist scene and all that. And so that was like score points kind of a thing or something to him, it seems. And so they were supposedly engaged, but secretly behind her back, he married another woman. And when Marx's daughter found out, she killed herself.
Yeah, that was Eleanor. And so you were astute to point out when Kegnor said both had suicide pacts with their husband, that was actually technical foul on him. I would have expected better from a scholar. So,
And
now that was granted, that was in an interview. Sometimes you'll just misspeak.
I've seen him say the same thing in other interviews. So I think it's just
That's
his
too bad.
standard way of simplifying it. Which, yeah, you can't just say something that's inaccurate to simplify it.
Yeah. Now
That is
there have
disappointing.
been times I have, there have been times I've written something, had it right, and then in a talk show I'll get it wrong. And so sometimes you end up repeating something that you yourself knew was right at one point, and then you just get confused, and you end up. I'm hoping that's the case because I would.
Yeah, it just seems easy to keep track of. It's so like apparent. One was this way, one was that way. It's such an interesting point. I just find it easy to remember, just to be honest.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is that it's like I was hoping a scholarship with those words would be good because then I don't have to worry if I'm citing them as a source. But after that mess up, which was so easy to catch, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to have to do some more work that I could verify the sources and his claims. But the basic issue is that without a transcendent moral basis, why would you expect Marx's dream to be capable of being implemented at all? Because you have the expectation that human beings will see, oh, this is something that would be worth my while to adopt. Why would you ever expect that under a atheistic worldview? Because as I've said on this, um,
Oh, you don't need to do it yet, but
yeah,
I think I'm on the same page. Yep, I'm on the page. So I actually have it right here.
yeah. So within an atheistic worldview, I've said that there are no answers in atheism. So um, how can one construct any moral basis if there are no answers in atheism? So if you'd like to read that, go ahead. Just to start, because this is just an insane. This is too long of an article, and it's too late at night.
Oh,
Um,
this is actually a whole book, but we're just gonna. I'm actually is on the exact part. I don't know how I did this, but my favorite already has the words highlighted and everything, so and is on the
what
page.
books? What books? What book is this?
This is the biography, memories of Lenin. I think that's the
Oh
chapter
no,
name.
that
Years.
I had something on Gramsci. Sorry. So what were you talking about?
Oh, I think I have it screen shared again. Yeah.
No,
Let
no,
me
but
see. I'll
what
do
were
it
you
one
trying to
more time.
share? I'm going to go
The
on to
the the, the
Gramsci.
Oh, what Lenin said about Marx's daughter. So I have it right here.
The font looks a little small, but
Well, I
um,
can zoom in some more, I guess, but it's a PDF, so it's an actual. It's like photographs of the actual book, kind of a thing. So the physical book, and this is the biography written by Lenin's wife. She calls him Ilyich. Yeah. So here's that Ilyich right here. So during this trip, Ilyich delivered a number of lectures in Switzerland. In October, the Lafargues, so that's the Marx's daughter, her husband was named Lafargue, the two that committed suicide in a pack. In October, the Lafargues committed suicide. Their death made a deep impression upon Ilyich. We recalled our visits to them. Ilyich said, "If one cannot work for the party any longer, one must be able to look truth in the face and die like the Lafargues." And he felt a desire to say over their graves, that's what Briars means, is graves, that their work had not been in vain, that the cause that they initiated, the cause of Marx, with which Paul and Laura Lafargue had been so closely associated, would grow. And I can finish his sentences. Yeah, it's just a tiny bit more that's on her. And spread, so it would grow and spread even to remote Asia, just at the time the tide of revolution was rising in China. That's a whole sentence. I don't know. Just at the time the tide just at the time the tide of the revolution was rising in China, Vladimir Ilyich wrote out the speech and Inessa translated it. I remember with what deep emotion he delivered the speech at the funeral in the name of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. On the eve of the new year, the Bolsheviks called a conference of the Bolshevik groups abroad. Everyone was in good spirits, although life abroad had frayed everyone's nerves considerably. So anyway, that's the whole section. So, but I don't know if you want
and
me to
one word that
focus
caught me.
again
Yeah,
on if
one
one
word that
cannot work.
go on,
Yeah, I'll
Nicholas.
just summarize back for the audience. If one cannot work for the party any longer, one must be able to look truth in the face and die like the Lafargues. And that's Lenin.
And you see again. So Marx was advocating atheism. On what basis is it that this is the right thing to do? They have none. And then they said, your death is not in vain. So what purpose does it serve? On what basis can you say that this is not in vain? Because obviously, the spread of their socialism and their ideas was terrible for the world. See, all these are just empty assertions with no fact. It would have been better if they had not served the communist movement. We see how that played out. It was horrible. But the thing is a lot of Christians will just say, well, look at these communist countries and they ended up so horribly. And so it's like, correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. They need to connect the dots. And it took me a while to think, why do these systems fail? It is because of the atheism, first of all, atheism and the morality issue. if you're going to take people's property, that means then the state owns everything. And whoever owns the state, what's going to make them behave right, so to speak? Because they're trying to sell all of this to the world and to the underprivileged, as saying this is going to help create utopia. And there were quotes from Kegnor that to that effect, that this is going to make things better, and it won't. It won't. Now, unfortunately, and this relates to what's happening at McLean and the invasion of cultural Marxism, they think, well, then if you have Christian morality all over the place, then communism would actually work. And that's a more subtle problem. That's a more subtle problem to deal with. It's not quite so straightforward. And so what ends up happening is we have people like Tim Keller quoting Marxists, and then this is spilling over into the seminaries. And they say, well, it's the Christian thing to do this or that. And I'm like, I don't think that's what the Bible teaches, that there's no private property. Because if it says don't steal, that means someone has private property. You don't steal from someone.
Yeah, and Tim Keller is especially like academically just a Marxist, you know. More so like
Red
right
Barrel
there.
Rider, I'm just sorry. This is not productive. I had to say goodbye to you. I really don't have time to be trying to correct this.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been able to have a productive discussion with Red Barrel Rider,
Yeah.
even though his
Sorry about
icon was
that guy.
similar to one or two other people that I also can't have productive discussions with, so I might complete them. And unfortunately, I don't like to complete people.
Okay, so sorry, Red Barrel Rider. You can. He seemed to try to be reasonable, but that was. I've seen some of his other comments, and we're just gonna agree to disagree. It's not creating a healthy climate in our discussion. First off, atheism is not justified empirically. It needs. It looks like there is a creator, and the secular nations, they are riding off of a very good Christian tradition, and Peter Hitchens is correct to be concerned. How long will this last? How long will a lack of transcendent morality, how long can it persist before it just falls apart? So it's not lasting very long. The secularization of the United States is eroding prosperity. It is eroding freedom. It's becoming more totalitarian, and the polar opposite of a secular society, a theocracy. No. So I'm sorry. I kept seeing the chat. I'm getting very distracted by it, and there are some things that were talking about the church attracting really bad people. I'm like, no. It attracts all sorts of. It attracts people in need. It attracts people in need. So I tolerated what I was seeing on the chat long enough. I just had to end it because we may have more shows, and I don't want Red Barrel Rider just weighing in, and then plus he attracts kind of people wanting to argue with him. It would have been better to ignore him, but he was attracting attention, and he was saying some comments there in some of the other streams. So sorry, Red Barrel Rider. I just don't have time for it on my channel. You know, if we were in debate by ourselves, I might have a chance to do this, but it's just a repeat of things I consider just false and unhelpful to understanding what's going on. So I do apologize to the viewers that I hadn't tossed him earlier. You know, I try to give people a little bit of leeway, and if I'd seen earlier that he was going to be such a negative effect, I would have terminated. Some people are really easy to spot. After 2 comments, some of them I can just toss just like that. But then this one was a little harder to make a determination on. So anyway, I had to toss him from the channel, guys. So where I was headed was what I was talking about is there's no expectation that atheism is going to, an atheistic viewpoint is going to make people act in a civilized manner. What's the basis of that? In fact, what's happening is now in these atheistic countries, breakdown in the family, in morality, in truth. Truth is now becoming criminalized. And Nicholas, we have to be kind of quiet about, you know, YouTube may deplatform me if I go into explicit, so I'm not going to go there. I could be very explicit and say where truth is now criminalized, but I could be, this YouTube channel could be shut, and I'm not ready to be deplatformed from YouTube yet.
But that's okay. I addressed it head on my own channel a few hours ago.
Yeah, okay. And, you know, there's euthanasia, there's creeping euthanasia, and all sorts of things. I mean, we see the craziness that's happening in our leftist cities. What's going on in Portland, it's fleeing from truth. Now, there's been kind of a funny relationship between Nietzsche and Christian intellectuals. For the fact that Nietzsche said some terrible things, but he did call out, he said, as Christian, the Christian moral system is removed from society, you could see the barbarism that would be emerging in the 20th century. Very spot on. Now, he was trying to say a few things of how he thought humanity could still be redeemed. I'm like, that part he got wrong. That part he got wrong, because there's no reason we should expect it to get better, because there are no answers in atheism. People will, why do you think they're going to, on what basis do you think people will eventually start to act rationally? Because you can't even define what rational is, or for the best interest of society, because that can't even be defined. That's the problem when you have no answers in atheism. How do you attach value to anything? Okay, so something has to be good or bad. How do you attach value to things? So that might be an interesting topic to cover, some of Nietzsche. And Jordan Peterson was a very good Nietzsche scholar, and he had some very good insights. So I might cover that. So we'll close the stream out with Gramsci, because there's this cultural Marxism that's invading the church, and Gramsci has been credited with starting cultural Marxism. And one reason I don't like doing this is it's so hard to, it's so hard to read the material. It's verbose and it doesn't make sense half the time. And I'd like to be able to distill what's actually wrong with it efficiently, and that's hard to do. But let me just read. Unless you want to read it, Nicholas, you can just grab the first. Um, just grab the introduction. Would you like to read it from your Wikipedia?
I could just look up Antonia Gramsci on my own.
Yep. And then you can
Okay,
bring
yeah.
this up, and then you can read it and do the
All right.
scrolling. So, guys, I'm sorry that the last part of the show really dragged. It was a little bit more dramatic with the stuff about Baptist Church of Lauderdale, and I got distracted by Red Barrel Rider.
Okay, I'm gonna have to
So
switch the screen and look
tomorrow
at the
will be a
spelling.
better, tighter show. Okay, so here we go. So if you could read just Gramsci. There you go. If you could read just like the first, just the introduction, the
And
introductory portion.
do you want me to
Go ahead.
zoom in more?
Um, you can try. Go ahead, and then just a little
Oh,
bit more.
if I go below the picture, I guess this is pretty good.
Okay.
It's just all the blue stuff that makes it kind of weird.
Yeah.
So, Antonio Francesco Gramsci. We have Annunciation was an Italian. Okay, January, the 22nd of January, 1891, through the 27th of April, 1937, was an Italian Marxist philosopher, journalist, linguist, writer, and politician who wrote on philosophy, political theory, sociology, history, and linguistics. He was a founding member and one-time leader of the Communist Party of Italy and was imprisoned by Benito Mussolini's fascist regime. Shall I continue?
Yes. Yes. Keep going.
Gramsci wrote more than 30 notebooks and 3,000 pages of history and analysis during his imprisonment. His prison notebooks are considered a highly original contribution to 20th century political theory. Gramsci drew insights from varying sources, not only other Marxists, but also thinkers such as Niccolò Machiavelli, Vilfredo Pareto, Georges Sorel, and Benedetto Croce. I don't know. The notebooks cover a wide range of topics, including Italian history and nationalism. Including Italian history and nationalism, the French Revolution, fascism, Taylorism and Fordism, civil society, folklore, religion, and high and popular culture. Gramsci is best known for his theory of cultural hegemony, which describes how the state and ruling capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, I'm not the best at pronouncing it, the bourgeoisie use cultural institutions to maintain power in capitalist societies. The bourgeoisie, in Gramsci's view, develops a hegemonic culture using ideology rather than violence, economic force, or coercion. Ideology rather than violence, economic force, or coercion. Oh, wow. Hegemonic culture propagates its own values and norms so that they become the common sense values of all and thus maintain the status quo. Cultural hegemony, sorry, I'm struggling with that particular word. Cultural hegemony is therefore used to maintain consent to the capitalist order rather than the use of force to maintain order. This cultural hegemony is produced and reproduced by the dominant class through the institutions that form the superstructure. Gramsci also attempted to break from the economic determinism of traditional Marxist thought, and so is sometimes described as a neo-Marxist. he held a humanistic understanding of Marxism, seeing it as a philosophy of praxis and an absolute historicism that transcends traditional materialism and traditional idealism.
Yep, that's enough. So praxis
Yeah.
is the process by which a theory, lesson, or skill is enacted, embodied, or realized.
You
It's a
say it was a
process,
method?
praxis. So he calls it a process, philosophy of process.
It's the philosophy of is the process by which okay, it's the philosophy of how to realize his theory, his lessons, you know? So it's the philosophy of how to make Marxism become real, you know, or the philosophy of praxis, the philosophy of making your teachings the ones that are actually practiced. That's what's going on there.
And Marxism's a historic, absolute historicism. That's ridiculous.
I think the absolute means something. It doesn't mean it's accurate to like reality. I think it means almost something. I think it means something weird, like almost like it's beyond
Yeah.
reality. It's
See,
absolute because he says transcends traditional materialism and transcends traditional idealism. So that absolute word, I
yeah.
think, is carrying something.
See, this is what I never like about some of these philosophical things. They just have these abstractions. You can just kind of you can decide what they mean later, and you never get clarity. You rarely get it. And I'd have to think about this. So this thing about cultural hegemony, I'm now seeing it in this woke culture, uh, and so the idea is when you change the culture, you change what is common sense.
So
And
they defy common sense because they want to change it, not because they're actually confused about it. And I don't necessarily mean the people who go along with the propaganda, but that's why they're purposely directing it that way. They're just trying to change the common sense gratuitously to put themselves into the this
yeah,
role of hegemony. I can't say that word.
so when I
Hegemony.
yeah, so when I was going into this thing about acting white, there's a Wikipedia entry on acting white, and then I showed a blog entry that said what are considered white values, and I was just like horrified. It's like this is everything. Like for example, just the idea of being scholarly is being called acting white. I'm just like, why do you have to put that prejudicial label? That's kind of like um, this Gramscian way of characterizing things. Um, that uh, it's characterizing being scholarly as a means of enforcing capitalism. I'm just like, this is just like very poisonous nonsense that is being swallowed, and it's going to have a negative effect. Um, so he apparently, I'm presuming he's. Um, so he says, uh, in Gramsci, the bourgeoisie, in Gramsci's view, develops a hegemonic culture using ideology rather than violence, economic force, or coercion. So now I'm beginning to see it. The idea is um, um, we have these classes of demographic groups. One demographic group um, is more prosperous than another if you just do the statistics. And he's saying that um, he's saying this cultural hegemony is therefore used to maintain consent to the capitalist order rather than the use of force to maintain order. And so now, oh man, this is messed up. I'm going to have to think about this a little more, because sometimes when you're just, it says in Proverbs, when you're reasoning, be careful about reasoning with a fool, because they're so messed up in the way that they understand reality. It's hard to show why it's messed up. It's
I
not always.
100% agree on it, because I don't try to argue with them, and so if you want to, then because that's why because when you go to someone who actually is like a leftist,
Yeah,
who doesn't believe in a god, and then you tell them that Marxism is actually the spiritual thing, so you can't try to like define your way out of being in the same spiritual
yeah,
thing. They just don't want to have the discussion anymore. But that's
yeah,
actually the reality. That's why it always results in the
right.
same thing, because what it is a spiritual, it's a
Well,
certain spirit and it has certain consequences.
well, see, that's the thing I'm trying to point out. We don't always engage these arguments because we're trying to convert an atheist. I find that a waste of time for the most part. What I mean by waste of time is we engage the argument to help the Christians who are struggling with this, because it's infiltrating the church. And so I need to try to point this out in order to encourage Christians not to be deluded, because they obviously they're swallowing this. And I had a hard time calling it out with Mike Kelsey trying to bring this to the church. And I said, what you're basically doing is what he was doing was blaming one group of people that were innocent of the crimes of individual acts of crime. I said, where do you get this? What kind of nonsense is that? But it was easy to sell. That's the sad thing. It's easy to sell and foment all this rage. So, like, for example, I'm sorry to use strong language, this rapist in Kenosha um, was trying to assault a woman. I think presumably he was banging on her door and she called the police. The guy had a restraining order for bad behavior. He wrestled with the police. The police shot him. I mistakenly said he was killed. He was just shot and paralyzed. But it got advertised as a racist act. And I'm like, any fathers of daughters out there, and your daughter is at risk of being assaulted, um, and the police guns the assailant down. I mean, you might say that was maybe excessive use of force, but I'm like, come on, guys. This is the worst case to be citing as an example of racism in America. This is like if you have a female loved one and she's being assaulted and the police come and, come there and try to stop the guy and he's resisting arrest and they happen to shoot him because they're afraid he's going to draw a weapon on him. It's like, okay, this is like the worst case, but the media didn't report it accurately. And people started looting and burning and torching neighborhoods that weren't involved in this at all. Why? What's the sense of that? Where's the justice served in this? And that's what I was getting upset with all these insinuations that, oh, we have a right to be angry at innocent people. I'm like, total stupidity. Got really upset about that. And so it took some time for me to figure out how to call that out, because people swallow the narrative that you could do stuff. You could think that way about people, what we call collectivizing it. I'm trying not to use fancy words. It basically is blaming innocent people for the crimes of guilty individuals. So you can you do that because they're the same skin color. Like, not that that makes sense, but that, that narrative is easily swallowed.
No, I am glad that there were many people who left over that, in the sense that I'm glad there were so many who were not fooled by it.
Yeah, they picked up on it, left quickly.
And I think there's a
Unfortunately, these
command to leave. I really think 1 Timothy chapter 6. No, yeah, that's the one. 1 Timothy chapter 6 concludes in having to turn away from them.
yeah. So unfortunately, these were the people that could have voted, and motions could have been put forward to get, to change this. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to chew on this thing
Well, there's
about this
something,
cultural hegemony.
and there's something I
Culture,
want to mention to you. With all this stuff you want to chew on, is that A.D. Robles has a book that doesn't really go into Marxism as the approach. It's more like straightforward Bible stuff, that kind of thing. It's called Woke Church Tactics and How to Engage Them.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I haven't read it, but because I don't read much, but
Okay.
I would highly recommend that. John Harris has one, is coming out with another one on the subject. And
Yeah.
more on the Marxist theory side would be Vodi Bakum. I think his book
Right.
Fault Lines would be right in that.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I know where I was headed with this. It's exactly the same way I critique abiogenesis. It's not that some Christians don't understand, well, why do you try to teach creationism by not appealing to the Bible? Why do you appeal to molecular biology? And this is it's a good opportunity to explain why. There are a lot of Christians that need assurance of their faith. I'm trying to instill their belief in the Bible. If they already believe the Bible, that's wonderful. But if they're wanting to have their faith strengthened for whatever reason, if it's wavering, one way to strengthen it is to actually say, okay, let's just I'm going to just it's based on John 10:38. Jesus said, if you do not believe my words, believe the works. If you do not believe my words, believe the works. So the remedy for if you're having a hard time believing Jesus's words is not to necessarily listen to more of them. Jesus himself said, study the works. So by way of extension, if you want to have evidence that God actually created things, study the creation. It says in Romans that his eternal power and divine nature are clearly seen in the things that are made. This is how you're reassured that the Bible is telling you the truth. Jesus gave the formula that if you're wrestling with believing, study the works. And sometimes Jesus will provide the works for you, like with doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas was doubting, and Jesus said, examine the wounds on his body. Sometimes the Lord will provide, but then I'm finding that there are marks in nature that tell you that there's a creator. So one way to do this is like when we study abiogenesis, we use a proof by contradiction, just like what we do in math, or argument by contradiction. Assume it was done by naturalism, and then you end up with these contradictions, and then you realize naturalism couldn't explain it. So then the reason I would suggest the way we analyze this Gramscian Marx, this cultural Marxism, is like, okay, let's just start from that framework and see where the inconsistencies are with empirically observed facts, and we'll pick it apart. Because then when you can see it that way, it's like, oh, that reassures me the way the Bible teaches it is correct. It also helps us interpret the Bible um, more solidly. So we can either start with a Christian worldview and then see that this is wrong. That's a valid approach. But another way to actually show it, like what happened with Peter Hitchens, he looked at Marxism, you know, because he was a reporter in the Soviet Union. As he actually made the observations of its effect, that led to his conversion to Christianity. It's very powerful when you start to look at the facts objectively. God starts pointing you in the right direction, and that's why C.S. Lewis said, a young man can't remain a sound atheist if he reads too carefully. If you start to assess the facts, you'll see something that'll point you to God. And that's what I was saying. Let me chew on this, because you'll start to see that there's a falsehood there, and it'll tell you this is not where your answers are. You need to go back to the Bible. And so, kind of like the story of the prodigal son, kind of in an intellectual sense, you kind of go there and you see that it fails, and you want to go back. You want to go back when you actually start to connect the dots. That's where I was headed. So Emery says, cultural hegemony, constant claims of white supremacy. Yeah. So what is considered whiteness? It talked about being on time, working hard, delaying gratification, being goal-oriented, being polite. And like, why was this all being, why was that all being demonized? That's like, how are you going to be valuable to society if you don't practice these things? And yet they were calling that whiteness, and it was something not to practice. And so I could see that they were saying that that has to be dismantled so that there's more equality. Well, okay, yeah, if you dismantle it, then more people will be miserable. So I guess in that sense, there's more equality.
So are you saying that they would take beneficial behaviors, like let's say doing well in studies or something, and say like that's white?
Yeah. So I
And
showed
so
this.
that the black person would feel like they shouldn't do that?
Well, let me just, okay. So I shared this the last 3 nights. I might as well again.
Okay.
There's this wiki article on acting white. Oops, sorry, mistake. What did I do here? There's a Wikipedia article on acting white. Sorry, blew it here. Acting white. In the United States, acting white is a term pejorative, usually applied to black people, which refers to a person's perceived betrayal of their culture by assuming the social expectations of white society. Success in education, in particular, depending on one's cultural background, can be seen as a form of selling out by being disloyal to one's culture. So let me explain this a little more by the words of Barack Obama himself. So Obama strongly, and this is one of the few times you're going to hear me commend Barack Obama. He said, Obama strongly criticized the idea that achievement was limited to acting white in his keynote address at the 2004 Democratic National Convention. He said that children can't achieve unless we raise their expectations and turn off the television sets and eradicate the slander that says a black youth with a book is acting white. So children can't achieve unless we raise their expectations and turn off the television sets and eradicate the slander that says a black youth with a book is acting white.
Okay, so that's more conservative than any Republican at the moment.
Yeah,
It's
that's
only
very,
been
that's a
17
very
years.
conservative statement. That
Well, by today's standards, it was normal back then. Neither conservative nor, it was just like a normal
well,
statement back then.
Obama
Well,
had it
yeah,
right. Why should a, someone who's African American, he's a youth, he's a boy, he's holding a book, why should he be said he's acting white? He's holding a book, you should say that's a great thing. He's studying. Why do you have to characterize it like that? And so this has been turned around in a recent Smithsonian. Let me see this. Shadow to light and uh,
and I didn't know how similar it was in like the 60s and early 70s and all that. Um, really until well, I stumbled on someone who comes in some of these streams. I went to his channel and he was doing like music, and it was kind of disturbing because it was all like Satan and hell themed. And one was Sinner Man. I looked it up and I found an artist. What's her name? Something Simone. Anyway, and it was just like uber wokeness, like the exact like racism and stuff now. Um, so this is something that like planted the seeds of and then worked on and are bringing back again.
okay, so Smithsonian. Okay, the Smithsonian lists white values. This is only in 2020, July 16th, and this is by Mike Jean. He says so. He collected what he found in the Smithsonian article. We've seen that thinking it important to have a father in the house is supposed to be white privilege. Now, according to the Smithsonian, we have more white values to consider. Self-reliance, independence and autonomy highly valued. Father, mother, 2.3 children is the ideal social unit. Objective, rational, linear thinking. Cause and effect relationships. Quantitative emphasis. Hard work is the key to success. Work before play. Respect authority. Plan for the future. Delayed gratification. Follow rigid time schedules. Action oriented. Decision making. So
Well, you
Mike
cut
Jean,
out there. Decision making, then
so
what?
be polite.
Okay.
So we are supposed to believe that these are oppressive values that are not shared by non-whites. These are oppressive values. It's now oppressive to value these things. So we are supposed to believe that these are oppressive values that are not shared by non-whites. Can I point out something obvious? If you reject these values, you are much more likely to end up in poverty. Does this have to be explained? And so that's kind of Gramscian Marxism expressing itself. Values were black people. I'm just like,
It cut you out again after the word values.
yeah, these. So this is Gramscian Marxism. It's like these values are there to oppress, for the white people to oppress other races. That's how it's now being characterized.
Those values aren't only for the single individual to remain out of poverty, but those create value, increasing the value of every single dollar, so forth, so on, being good for the economy for everybody.
Yeah. This is slanderous to say that, but Obama was actually ignored in this thing. One of the few things Obama got right, that's been ignored, because Obama was saying someone carrying a book shouldn't be accused of having white values, shouldn't be called acting white.
But I agree with Emery so much there. I think I said something rather similar to you like yesterday.
Yeah.
I may have mentioned you in my stream earlier because I was addressing the state of the church and all that. It's
Well,
just
and I have to admit, see, the reason I didn't see this is no one taught it to me. And sometimes even if they're teaching it to you, it's not clear enough that I could connect the dots. I was upset to see this. Worried when people talk about Gramscian Marxism, I'm like, what is that? I never heard that. And then I'd read it and just like, why should I waste time? This is drivel. But now that I see it invading my church, I'm just like, oh, I better try to deal with it because look what it's doing to our church. It's killing it. It's killing our seminaries or cemeteries. Well, you can't kill something in a cemetery if it's buried dead already. But I had enough of my battles with the creation evolution controversy. And then this, I expected people to be more rational, really. I wouldn't have ever thought that, like what I just showed, I didn't think that I would have to fight this battle because it's like really obvious that you don't. I didn't expect a rational society to adopt a viewpoint that this is evil and oppressive.
and it is the Smithsonian is like in essence promoting the viewpoint.
Yeah, that these are oppressive values. That if you practice them, you're being oppressive. Like what? How is it oppressive to believe that hard work is important for success? How is that oppressive? I mean, how is that? How is that being oppressive? You know, this is society going off the rails, and um, I just didn't. It, the creation evolution controversy was hard because you had to learn so much. I was like, what's there to learn about this as far as realizing these ideas, this Gramscian Marxism here, that is drivel. It's stupid. I mean, if I instilled values in children that they need to work hard to be successful, how's that being oppressive? Do you want me to teach them yeah, goof off, goof off? That way you won't be an oppressor anymore. Goof off and you won't be an oppressor anymore. If you're from a white family that's affluent and therefore privileged, the way you can affect social justice is to goof off. Why don't you goof off? Because if you value hard work, you're being oppressive. That's what this is coming from, this Smithsonian thing. I'm just like, and the other thing is, try not to have a nuclear family, to try to help, if you procreate, make sure it's a single parent household. I just like, this is like really common. This should be like trivially obvious that this is not going to turn out well for your life if you goof off and you want to pursue a single parent household. I mean, this is.
So, are you aware of Simone Biles? What went
No.
on just the other day? Well, she. I'm not really trying to focus on her. I don't know what's going on because they promoted her a lot going up to the Olympics, and she's some gymnast. And
Oh
she
yeah.
happens to be black, which would not be relevant, except that they seem to be doing propaganda, because they promoted her, and then she quits, and then they praise her like she's a hero for quitting, a hero for knowing that, because she's not really having fun. I mean, that's literally what she said. She mentioned not having fun 2 or 3 times in like a very short bit about why she quit.
Yeah. So I was going to close the stream because I was kind of wearing out and my mind was wandering. But as I began to think on this more, it started to clarify what I was trying to say. And these are, in prior generations, I didn't even have to give this a second thought. Now, to work hard, I don't, that's just so foreign to me. Okay. So in his image says, I've seen this. I've talked to black people who told me they were threatened for working rather than collecting a check by other black people. Wow. Threatened.
A check by other black people? Is that the exact words you meant there? I don't quite understand what that
Okay,
means.
so he said, I've talked to black people who told me they were threatened for working rather than collecting a check by other black people. So,
I just don't understand the word by there.
okay, so let me relate this. My friend Harold, he's African American. He was very studious. He was being persecuted for being studious. They said he was acting white, like a white boy, because that's something white people did. At least that's the way they were perceived. And since in their mind, white people were bad, everything that they do must be bad, including being scholarly, going to school. And in fact, in that Wikipedia article on acting white, it specifically singled out education. So he is being persecuted for working, essentially. And this has gotten worse now that if you're black and you're working, those on welfare will persecute you. In this in this incident that Emery's mentioning, wow, that's why would someone do this? Well, one suspicion is that there's inherent jealousy. There's inherent jealousy there that someone is obviously trying to be a better person, and um, basically to get ahead, and and especially if you think that person's going to succeed, that creates jealousy. That's that's my speculation. There's an inherent jealousy. Um, you know, Also when you see someone who's both gifted and determined to work hard, because that kind of highlights where someone might be. It's like um, you can start to feel bad about yourself when you see someone applying themselves and you're not. You can either respond by trying to be a better person and try to start working, or you could just continue the way you are. It also highlights maybe some facts that there might have been many years of your life you weren't applying yourself. And so the presence of someone basically showing them up with the way they conduct themselves, that can foment some jealousy. But still, this is not a good situation. Um, um,
I mean, say KL says it's a counterculture. Working hard and studying is inferior and despicable. And I used
yeah.
to be like a punk rocker and a metalhead, before I was saved. And like, yeah, I'm starting to see how like all countercultures are bad for this reason. That's the whole reason they're called counterculture. I never
Um,
knew that before. Not exactly,
So
anyway.
who is this? Who is this girl that you said she just didn't? What was her name again? Simone.
Simone Biles. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow. I totally get it that people can be stressed out, especially people who are high achievers, and um, that's a decision they have to make. I mean, if they're getting too stressed out, that's not good. I mean, um, so I don't know what to say about that. Okay, so it's good to
I showed
achieve,
a
but you know, I'd say it's always good to achieve to within certain limits. Um,
Yeah, and then it's like
and I,
deciding where that limit is because
yeah,
I showed a clip on the show I did earlier today, um, where a comedian, but he's like patriotic and stuff. He showed a gymnast who, with an injured leg, did two more runs. And she didn't land the first one because her leg was injured, and she barely landed the second one, and she only got 1 and 2 points for them. But USA got the gold, and they would not have gotten the gold if she didn't do those runs. That was like back in the 90s. And that thing is, it's being a champion, like an inspiration, you know? And
yeah,
I'm not saying someone's obligated to do it, but it's just like to inspire us that when we really have to do something important to really strive and like all that, you know?
yeah, yeah. It is a tough call sometimes, and I'm not. It's not my place to judge, but there is something to be said. Like if you don't do anything, and in fact, the Bible teaches, "Let him not eat if he doesn't work." So there is like, yeah, there's an expected minimum of what you have to do to apply yourself. If you're able-bodied, God expects something out of you. And and um, um the idea is like, you know we do have to take care of our bodies. So if you're working so hard that you're killing your body, that's not good. There has to be some wisdom in limiting. So if you're the kind that tends to overwork, then yeah, maybe you have to try to relax. If you're the kind that doesn't apply yourself hard enough and you have the capacity to work harder, then you should apply yourself. And I think a lot of people can figure out where they are. I can tell you, I think I need to work harder.
Yeah,
So
and then also certain kinds of people then like are supposed to not end up at the Olympics because of that too. So it's like the Olympics is a specific role, you know?
yeah, I mean, there was a time in my life I was overworking, and that wasn't good. I was working full time and going to school full time, wasn't getting enough sleep. Thank God I didn't die driving and falling asleep at the wheel because I was so tired. And I definitely did overwork. I actually was working full time. I had a part time job, and I was going to school full time. That was just nuts. Um, um, People were wondering why. It's, well, like, I wanted to move ahead in my life faster, and I wanted to get it over and done with. But oh boy, that was hard on the body, and I didn't have to push myself quite that hard. Um, so um, I don't. Yeah, I know how we got on that topic. But the thing that is not helpful is to just have a culture that demonizes hard work of any kind. That's not good. And then to call it cultural oppression. So is someone if someone is white and then he's like it said here, in the article I quoted earlier. Let me just show it here. Um, we've seen that thinking it important to have a father in the house is supposed to be white privilege. So let me look that up. Having two married parents becomes white privilege. Here's a video about white privilege that activists and virtue signalers like to share on social media. If you watch it, you'll find that the first two examples of white privilege are having two parents who are still married if you grow up with a father figure in the house. I kid you not. Those are the first two examples raised of white privilege.
And someone should tell all my living siblings they were all born before my parents were married to, parents that are now apart. If that makes sense. They're like step siblings, half siblings.
But the idea is that they're not coming from a married family as white privilege. And it's really funny because David Platt was said, I repent of my white privilege. I'm just like, what do you mean? Okay. So if your parents were married and you happen to be white, that's white privilege, and you're going to repent of that, David Platt? Bodhi Bakum called him on it. So anyway, in his image, thank you. By the way, before we say goodbye, Emery, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And so we'll shut down in about 5 minutes. So I just sent you a link here. If you could join, I just wanted to see you and see if you want to. Now, if you can't come, if your camera is not working or whatever, I understand. Let's see if I could stop my share here.
This really is also very sad. And it's not sad that there's a certain skin color associated with it. It's just sad for all the people involved.
So anyway, I don't know if Emery can join us. I dropped a restream link there for you, Emery. But I was going to ask you if you can hear. I wanted to know if you're done with school and if you feel you did well. So that was really all I was going to ask you. And if you are done, I wanted to congratulate you, sir. Tomorrow I'm having an event. Rather than a 3-hour stream, I'm going to try to actually limit it to 45 minutes. Oh my goodness. Because we're trying to reach out to people at McLean Bible Church. There are a variety of reasons why some people are still there who are godly and have their eyes open. They have a great disabled ministry for disabled people and special needs, families that have children with special needs, etc. That's the one remaining ministry at McLean that is there. Okay, thanks, Emery.
I think I just came in as a guest. I'm quite sure.
Okay,
Yes.
so if you might be able to, yeah. So Nicholas just said, Emery, that he was able to get in as a guest. If that helps you any, but the disabled ministries are something that it's like I could support that. That's enough of a reason to keep being a part of McLean in the interim. And what we're trying to do, like for tomorrow night, is to have, because so many of the ministries at McLean have been decimated, there are a lot of spiritual needs not being met. And so one way that we can meet that is to have like fellowship groups and activities. So tomorrow I'm going to give kind of basically part of a talk that I've from material you've heard earlier, even in like the last 2 weeks when I was talking about the problem of evil. So tomorrow's show is going to be kind of a rerun, but I'm going to try to make the presentation a little tighter and a little more succinct. It might even have to be a 2-part thing to discuss the problem of evil. It's just also kind of a test run. We're trying to find ways that we can minister to the body at the local church and encourage them and give them something of value to meet their needs while they're at McLean. The thought being is whatever happens to the church, whether they leave or not, we have given them something of value. And this is done with the hope that there's still a chance that the leadership could be changed. We don't know. So that's such a tough call. But wherever the people of the Lord are, I will try to, I will offer to, to serve them, to be of service to them. And in this case, with my training and research in apologetics, evidence and reasons for the Christian faith. And then, I probably will be rather upfront about my views about what's coming out of the pulpit. And maybe that, whether it influences their vote or not, fundamentally, I have a responsibility to be a watchman. And after reading what was happening at Fort Lauderdale, my stomach was turning because it sounded all too familiar. It was released today in the capstone report that David Platt wanted to have the right to excommunicate people. So that means if he had that, and from the pulpit he was saying people visiting my blog, which would probably mean also the people creating the blog, which would be me, he called that ungodly. I could be subject to excommunication for this YouTube channel. I could be subject to excommunication, especially since I broke the story on Mike Kelsey.
Well, it really
Who
seems like
else?
something multiple people need to be involved in, like the elders.
Well, see, right now the elders need to be involved in an excommunication. He was wanting authority to excommunicate himself on his own discretion. And I'm like, well,
That just doesn't seem right. Yeah, I don't care if like you're the head pastor. Like one person doesn't just go like, "I decide you're excommunicated." That's just not how
okay,
church
that's the capstone
does.
report. It needs to be verified, but I'm hearing that
No,
this,
no, no. I'm believing you. I'm just
yeah,
saying it's wrongful.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If it is true, on some level, you hope it's not true, but it's like I'm not surprised by anything anymore. Uh, and then what happened at Fort Lauderdale? They lost just on a whim. Said this isn't. They don't reject. They came up with some excuse that there was an error in the counting or what. I don't know what it was. I just read it, but I forgot. Um, they said it's invalid and they didn't accept it. But then it's like, okay, the last vote was not secret, so now they have the list of all the no vote people. I mean, one does worry that if a church leader got that level of authority and the ballots were no longer secret, he could just say, oh, excommunicated, excommunicated, excommunicated. And then you
Well,
can consolidate your power. And now that may lead to your control of $150 million property. Scary.
yeah, and I mean, I guess maybe this is moot if those sorts of things is really what it's about. But just the fact that David Platt comes in new, and instead of saying this church's churches and this is this congregation's congregation, it's this gathering's gathering that I want to serve. David Platt want to serve them. That's not the posture at all. The posture is now that I'm here, this is my congregation. I want to rule it. And I cannot like relate with that at all. I don't
Yeah.
understand it.
I don't understand it either, but it's scary. So I will, I will, um, I'll be open and say this is where I stand. If you're going to McLean, I'm glad to be of service to you. Um, I don't agree with everything that's being preached, and certainly not every practice that is going on there. So they might legitimately ask, then why don't you go to another church and serve the people there? It's like, well, I can serve the other people there too as a non-member, um, and I can serve people at McLean. So that's what I'm going to do. Uh,
See one of Doki's comments? I don't know this one. What's this?
yeah. Excommunicated people in the Church Inquisition. You can't make this up. Yeah. So, Emery, if you're not able to get through, we'll have a restream sometime. I mean, StreamYard that you through. I'm finding out the hard way that sometimes restream is hard to log on. So let me just do a quick screen share, and then if Emery you're not able to get through, I'll just shut down the stream. We'll try again another day. But this capstone article, and I hear word that we're going to get a little more documentation on all of this. Former elders have said that these things have transpired. So this is the capstone report. David Platt sought more power to weaken McLean Bible Church and church elders. Okay, so godly for us to do this. Rather than reading the Word of God, rather than reading the Bible. Leaked internal documents. Okay, so the question came up is, how do we know that this is true? Remember, we have former elders who've come out and said that there's bad things happening. I've heard that the former elders have said they witnessed this. They've seen this. Oh, and there's Emery. Is he here? No, that's Nicholas. Sorry. So I'll read a little bit on the excommunication. But Platt wanted fully centralized discretionary power that would include even excommunication. Platt wanted full power that would include even excommunication. However, Platt and Young grudgingly admitted that would likely not be possible. Okay, so let me back up a little bit. One glaring example was in the area of church discipline. Platt sought to totally remove the elders from the process and replace it with a far more autocratic system. According to slide 3 of this presentation, this leaked document, decide how to discipline members on level 1, 2, that is, rebuke, restriction from serving role, or a church group. But Platt wanted fully centralized discretionary power that would include even excommunication. However, Platt and Young grudgingly admitted that would likely not be possible. They said of church discipline on slide 3, not ideal, but perhaps level 3 excommunication requires elder approval. Such centralization of church discipline is clearly unbiblical. The process of church discipline, particularly the highest levels, requires not only the elders but the church body itself. Most congregational churches place membership decisions to church vote alone. McLean Bible invests the elders with the responsibility to discipline members and regular attenders. Okay, then they talk about what the church constitution says. I can tell you that just the idea of a single pastor, individual pastor, excommunicating a member, that is scary. Jesus Okay, so like let's say excommunicating an elder. Jesus said it has to be on the witness of two or three. Don't accept the charge just on one witness. It's reasonable to extend that to excluding someone from the congregation altogether. So anyway, this is going to be interesting. I don't know how long I'm going to last there. Certainly, if the elders grant Dave Platt that authority, I'm gone. You know, uh, I don't. I don't. If he gets that authority, then he can purge. He can purge the voter rolls, and the last resort would be secular courts, and that's kind of scary. So, in any case, Nicholas, thank you for joining us. Oh, here.
Nice.
Welcome. Thanks for gracing us with your presence before we shut down. I just wanted to ask you if you're done with school. Uh-oh. His microphone's having problems.
Oh, say shalom.
I'm sorry, Sal. I can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Thanks for persevering. Goodness, I didn't mean for it to be such an ordeal for my good friend. I didn't mean to make your life difficult, brother.
Yeah, Restream hates me. Hey, Sal. So I actually had to restart my
Jesus
laptop
loves you.
and use a backup browser because I could not log in through Chrome no matter what I did. So yeah, but I'm on Firefox and it's working. So anyway,
Well, are you done with school? Uh-oh. That didn't last long. How about we put this stream out of its agony? Emery, if you're hearing this, I'm going to be ending the stream. Nicholas, you've been so patient hearing me do my monologues and rants. Do you have some closing thoughts before we shut down?
Not specific closing thoughts. I just really appreciate what you're doing here. Just calmly, honestly being truthful, you know?
Yeah, I felt it's relevant. It's interesting to me, and I needed to add a little drama to the channel to help get a little bit more traffic. And actually, by doing so, by getting more traffic, I at least let people know that we have other. This channel actually does exist, and we have material that might be of help to them. So I was thinking to myself, kiddingly, I said, "Yeah, we just needed a dash of Smoky Saint for this channel to move forward." So, Emery, do you have? Are you done with school?
I'm done with all but one of my classes. I have just to finish the discussion board for that class. I'm done with that class. So the two classes I've gotten back, I've got A's in. The third one, I'm waiting on the grade. So I'm not taking 7 credits over the summer again, though.
Well, I commend your hard work, sir. You're an example. And
I'm doing my best.
and according to the woke gospel, you're acting white.
Well, I mean, I'm acting what I am, I guess. So, I mean, I got a little melanin than you do, Sal. So.
So I don't know. I can't believe what the creation evolution controversy to me was difficult because some things were not so obvious, like how to critique abiogenesis. But some of this woke stuff is so like blatantly obviously bad. It's like how can you swallow this? I didn't think I had to fight it because I thought people would be sensible enough.
Unfortunately,
that's the devil.
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, no. People actually aren't that sensible. And I mean, I've kind of sort of known this for a long time because I was into politics for a long time. Not so much now because I think both parties are basically the same anymore. But if I drop out again, I apologize. I don't know what's going on with my internet tonight. Probably because it's 2:30 in the morning and I'm not usually
Well,
trying
maybe
to
I'll
use the
just shut
internet.
it down, and maybe when you come on again, I'll try to make sure it's StreamYard for you.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sorry about that, Sal. Restream just
well,
really hates me, and I don't know why.
Momentarily, I want to tell people how I did know that people are not that sensible because I've only been saved for about 4.5 years. So it was only, like 5 years ago, I was like clueless as to the truth. And then I was even worse in further years back. So, yeah, it's not as surprising to me.
yeah. I never thought I'd even have to bother fighting this fight. I thought Christian churches would see this, and I would thought seminaries would be more sensible. It's like you said, Emery, cemeteries.
That is still one of my favorite videos because I managed to green screen in cemetery headstones behind me. That's still one of my favorite videos. just for that reason, I did.
Yeah. So this isn't a fight.
I remember I was offended that you had a pirate flag up, Emery. I'm like overly pious like that, I guess.
Yeah. So
I'm kind of poking fun, but I don't like it.
I don't really
I'd like.
care. I honestly didn't care for it either. I'll just be perfectly honest with you. But when the whole plagiarism thing broke with Lit, and I'm like, okay, I gotta bring this out because we have an actual pirate. We have an actual literal pirate.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it turned out to not really be that way because the docent research group is a Marxist infiltration unit.
Well, okay, Lytton, I think, is actually still stealing his
Operation.
sermons. I think Lytton actually is stealing his sermons. And the reason I think that is because Greer made a mistake in telling the parable of the talents, and Lytton made the same mistake. So I think that Lytton actually is stealing his sermons.
Well, you don't think the docent research group could have made the mistake,
I've seen their
and
stuff.
they can sell their sermons on docent research group. So he
They
could have
could.
bought a Jamie Greer sermon on docent research
don't
group.
think so.
I don't know.
I don't think so because I've seen
Okay.
I've seen what docent puts out, and that's one of these days. I'm waiting for Protesti to drop some of the stuff that they've got because they've got a ton of stuff that they just haven't dropped all of it yet. But I've seen some of the stuff they put out. It is heavily footnoted. It is very professional. It's very well put together. These people are not rank amateurs. Lytton is a rank amateur. The people at docent are not. They're actually doing pretty professional work to make people like Matt Chandler and J.D. Greer look good. And I wouldn't be surprised if just about every other megachurch pastor in America has or has at least all the woke ones have used docent. It would not surprise me in the least. And if Platt's name happens to pop up in that, I will let you know, Sal.
Thank you.
But basically, I think Lytton actually is that sloppy. Because he actually mimics Greer's mannerisms too. When he tells Greer's stories as his own, he changes how he speaks.
Well, it's funny. They just put in another Greer.
I know.
A Greer
much
puppet,
less charismatic version of J.D. Greer. Because at least with J.D. Greer, as much as I can't stand that man's theology, he at least is charismatic. Lytton is a stuffed suit.
Yeah, he's like, I'm a little doofusy would be a fair word choice. But at the same time, I just want to mention that for me, the bigger scandal is not, Ed Litton plagiarizing, but it's
Right,
that
no.
the docent research group is a Marxist infiltration project.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's a much bigger problem. I appreciate Ed Litton. I never thought I'd say that, but I appreciate Ed Litton for being a plagiarist, because by the fact that Ed Litton is a plagiarist, it exposed all the other ugly stuff that was going on underneath. I'm not exactly sure how Docent got dragged into this, but ever since they have, it has just been one explosive revelation after another. And it has gotten uglier and uglier and uglier. And like at this point, I'm going, well, basically any milquetoast megachurch pastor, I am assuming that you've used Docent, and I am assuming that you are probably at least quasi woke. But yeah, it's not particularly pleasant.
You're talking about charismatic preachers and their mannerisms.
Good grief.
I don't know who this guy is.
I have no clue who it is either, but I'll tell you what, I recognize what that looks like. That is a seeker-sensitive megachurch that really probably preaches a watered-down. Maybe they give the gospel. Don't really ever talk about sin, and I mean with the stay positive message in the background. I mean,
I know that's like satire.
I mean, I wish it was.
This is my favorite. This pastor hop, skip, and a jump.
Please don't call him a pastor.
And see, the congregation's clapping. They love it.
Yep. Heaping to themselves teachers having itching ears.
How could someone itch to watch a man skip and try to like hype you up by skipping?
I gotta credit them. It's entertaining, you know. And then here's another. I shouldn't laugh, but it is funny.
I mean, I would like to pretend. I almost don't believe that that's a thing, except at the bottom it says Pastor Hughes.
Yeah, and I like everything about it except that it's like except that there's a podium in front of it. in the sense that like it's funny, and I like that it's funny, but it does not belong in a church at all.
No, it doesn't. Of course, if we're really being honest here, Nicholas, how much of what actually goes on in a church actually belongs in a church? Like there was a church in my area recently that for Sunday morning service, they brought in a cowboy and had him break a horse in a horse ring for their church service. And no, I'm not making that up. I wish to heaven I was.
So a towel boy is someone who breaks horses?
No, a cowboy.
Oh, a cowboy. Okay,
cowboy. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't have all. I was going to bed. I wasn't planning on getting involved in the stream, so I'm not hooked up to anything. I don't have all my mic and fancy equipment hooked up, so I apologize. But I mean, it's just.
Well, yeah, I didn't expect to be in this fight. This is, on an intellectual level, it's not that hard to call some of this stuff out. I mean, the stuff in creationism was very much more challenging. You were actually dealing with people that were very smart and had, at least some coherency in their thinking. But this woke stuff is just like, goodness, what can I say?
Just rhetoric piled on rhetoric piled on rhetoric, in my opinion. Right.
I mean, that's exactly what it is to a certain extent. It's just bad logic compounded by more bad logic. I mean, that's just
exactly
what it is.
So, do you guys have any? Nicholas, I'll start with you, and then Emery, and then we'll shut this down. I'm going to look for my ending credits shortly. Nicholas, go ahead if you have anything on your heart. If you have, and we'll do some more stuff, hopefully in the future.
Yeah, I just want to mention to everyone that slackness of truth, when we are slack on truth, that's a real problem. We can't just wait until it's like straight up deception or something before it matters. If we're loose on truth, that's not the people that we are. That's not like what we're called to. And I think I should say something, Sal, that you mentioned that the church was enamored with David Platt's celebrity. Originally, that was how you described it once.
Yeah.
And I just think hiring a pastor on that motivation is just a recipe for there to be a judgment attached to it. Like, you cannot hire a pastor on a motivation like that. And it's not valid. So I don't mean to be like mean, but that's something that has to be learned too. That's a real slackness of truth there. And if the motivation for why to choose a pastor had been correct, no problem like this ever would have happened. So if there had not been slackness of truth back then when it mattered, this never would have happened. I know that's a hard truth, but I think it's valuable to
Well,
share.
as Spurgeon's rightly pointed out, and I'm taking this to heart, and I only learned about this like the last 2 weeks. Discernment is not merely knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's knowing the difference between right and almost right.
Yeah. That was actually what I was going to quote. Was going to be that we need to learn to figure out not what's right and wrong, because that's usually pretty clear cut. It's what's right, and what's right with just a little bit of air mixed in, because that tends to be a whole lot more deadly than the actual poison. If you try to poison a rat, or realistically any animal that you want to do, you can't just give him rat poison. He won't eat it. You have to mix the rat poison with something that he will eat. And I submit that many in the evangelical church are currently mixing rat poison with good food.
Oh, very good food. Yeah.
There's just enough rat poison in there to kill and destroy churches, as First Baptist Fort Lauderdale, for McLean, and other churches are finding out. There's enough poison in there to kill churches.
Oh, goodness, yes. Yes. Because David Platt's early sermons were actually pretty good. I didn't find anything objectionable, like when he gave a sermon on Ruth, the book of Ruth. It was the best sermon I ever heard on the book of Ruth, ever. And passages in Ezekiel. So it came as a huge disappointment when that woke stuff started to creep in. So, did you have anything else, Emery? I'm going to just shut down now.
All. That was it for me.
Well, we made 3 hours, 40 minutes. It usually happens with a variety show. It's actually
I did 4 hours 20 earlier, so I have a full 8 hour day today. Well, I wasn't here the whole time, but
so usually long streams are actually easier. It's the short streams, and I'm going to have one that's going to be, I'm going to limit it to an hour tomorrow. I'm going to try to get my message done in 45 minutes. So I actually have to work harder at that one, because you actually have to rehearse it to make sure you're within your time limit. So that does take time. So tomorrow I'm going to be covering material I have before, which is on the problem of evil. But the audience that I'm inviting is specifically the McLean audience. And I'm recording this to have it also recorded so that I can now start referencing specific videos on my website, which I'm revamping. And then we'll have all these little lesson modules that are kind kind of like standardized amounts of time. So this is going to be interesting. I'm going to have to be a little bit more disciplined in my presentations, and it's going to take a little bit of more work. So it's been great being with you all. Thank you for bearing with the long time that this was being presented. And, sometimes my presentation wasn't quite that tight or well thought out. And as I said, these streams sometimes
and mine too.
Yeah. Sometimes these streams are really for the fellowship. That's why they last long, is because I enjoy spending so much time with you all. And that's honestly why I think they do drag on. I'm having just a blessed time being with you all. So with that, I'm going to close with what's becoming a favorite among the participants, and that is the Shore and music by Rachmaninoff. So if you all could mute your mics, I'm going to play this and then I'll shut down the stream. Take care, everyone, and the Lord be with you. Have a good night.